Yeah. I wonder if back on air.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you.
And if drama and change are the necessary ingredients of the Hardy Ferrari 1000, they're certainly happening this year, because in this last hour, all sorts of strife have occurred to many of the leading runners, and the position now is quite different. To start with, Alan Moffat, who was leading, has had major trouble. Howard Marsden.
Right, the problem was originally the fan belt had come off, then they went in further. They found that the bottom pulley on the end of the crankshaft has actually fallen off the car. They've tried to fix it in the pits. It's no good. They've had to push it off. Bond has been past him 6 times now. It really means that Moffat's race is run with regard to being competitive.
Another car to suffer a major disaster in the pits when they seem to be going very well. Not the Charlie O'Brien car we're watching at the moment, but the Alan Grice car with Frank Gardner, number 12. That too was in the pits for a long time.
Yes, he had problems again in the engine around the distributor electrical problems. I don't know exactly what the thing was, but again, it's really rendered him as non-competitive again.
And John Goss, as we watch the O'Brien Wayne Negus car pulling out in the pits, the second of the Holden Dealer team cars, bearing in mind that it is now car 1 that's leading the event by a fairly handsome margin, Colin Bond and John Harvey. But John Goss, he's gone to the back of the pitch with the clutch that's playing up.
So again, I assume that they will actually change it and come out and finish, but again, we have now lost the 2 front-running Falcons. The last of the Falcons running is Murray Carter, who is having one of his traditional steady runs, and we can only sit here and wish him luck that a steady run will allow him to get up into the high places eventually. And talking of Murray Carter, we've got him going into the pits now. In fact, it's Ray Winter, his co-driver in the car.
And an official announcement in the pits, Alan Moffat has retired.
What a shame.
Alan Moffat is out of the race. Sterling Moss, though, is in the race. He's out on the track. Ray Winter there, the diminutive figure, in the only surviving Falcon with any sort of show in this race. John Goss in the back to have a clutch change, and that'll take a lot of time. Certainly removes the Ford challenge. A rather leisurely exit by Winter as he comes out.
No, I think that, well, I think this is Bond now that we're picking up, who's the leader, and he has at least 1 lap lead over Bobby Morris and John Fitzpatrick in the number 7 Tirana.
So it's developing into an all-Holden race. Colin Bond, who made a pit stop during the lunch break, but it was no more than the scheduled one. He was there for 2 minutes. John Harvey took over and went out, and this should be Harvey in the car. We watch for the helmet as they go by. Hard to tell when they wear the same pattern helmet, but it is John Harvey driving the car, taken over from Colin Bond. Goes thundering up the right-hand side of Mountain Straight. He is now covered in the early 90s, about on his 92nd lap. This is 163 laps.
The next most interesting thing, of course, is that according to, again, we're unofficial, we're waiting for IBM to catch up on the lap. It would seem that the Brock car is back into 3rd place, even after having lost those laps that he did on fuel.
They were 6 laps behind at one stage, Peter and Philip Brock. The reason for the loss of fuel was not that he just miscalculated, as we thought, maybe unkindly, but apparently they have a broken fuel line. They had to fix that. They had a petrol leak, in other words. That's been fixed. And as we watch Colin Bond there, passing on the inside of Bruce Hodgson with the Triumph Dolomite, the Endress car, I think, which is running pretty well up in the class. Yes, we speculate once more just what Brock may do, because he is well and truly back in this race with a chance. Bob Morris in car number 7. Is running 2nd by your calculations,
Yes,
Howard?
again, as we mentioned, basically, if we run down it, it's Brock and Harvey in 1st place in the Tirana. 2nd is Morris Fitzpatrick, and 3rd, we believe, and there's a question mark on this one, Brock in the number 6 Tirana again.
We've got quite a race, in fact. We've got Sterling Moss just going through Hell Corner, or the first corner out of the bend, and he's got car 5, which is Peter, if I can think of his name, I'd say what it was, only Peter Brock, just the winner last year, and he has Bobby Morris right behind him. So 3 pretty house chargers travelling up Mountain Straight at the moment, with Bobby Morris running second, and the man we think is running third, Peter Brock, just a little bit in front of him, and Sterling Moss around there as well. That's Colin Bond going very wide and very close to the fence. Not Colin Bond, of course, Johnny Harvey in the Colin Bond car.
Murray Carter has completed his pit stop, so that was just a standard pit stop. It means he's still in the running, and I believe Murray is back in the car now.
Yeah, the whole dealer team seems to be signalling something.
Yes, there's a brake lights going on and on, and he shouldn't be braking there, whether he's having to pump up his brakes or not, but the brake lights were flashing there, unless there's some different signal he has for his headlights where all the lights go on at once. But there was definitely the flash of red lights. But watch as he comes in, a weaving motion there. And whether Colin's in brake trouble, he's got quite a long lead at the moment. Oh, sorry. Confirmation comes from the back of the pits. The information we gave you just a few minutes ago that Moffat is definitely out. They're not going to try and replace the crankshaft pulley, so confirmation that Moffat has retired from the race. Johnny Harvey.
The car seems to be weaving a certain amount under brakes.
Certainly taking a fairly erratic line there, in the rough on one side, and then across right beyond the white marker on the other side of the road.
Harry First, together with Keith Shelton, has developed an extraordinary brake system for the front of this car. What they've done is to really negate the rear brakes. The rear brakes honestly don't work on the back of the car. It's just there inert, so that nothing can go wrong with it. And they've put on brake pads on the front of the car that are 1 inch thick. This means that they can run those brakes all day. If by any chance anything goes wrong with that particular calculation, because of the special caliper that they built onto it, they can change brake pads 4 tyres in less than 1:30. So that the car has got this strange ability to be able to run really hard on brakes, which has been the Tirana's big failing for the last 3 years at Bathurst.
John Harvey enforced to take a wide line there to pass. We should be waiting for all the Tirana to come. Sterling Moss coming through. There we have now the second place schedule at the moment, the Bob Morris John Fitzpatrick.
Now it'll be very interesting to see whether Bobby Morris has been absolutely right in the way that he's done his pit stops. He's now had 2 pit stops, and they've both been very leisurely, I think is the only way to sort of talk about it.
Last one about 2:45, I guess. There's Sterling Moss right behind him, by the way, the 2SM sign up the tail there, which was quite a marker for Delaca, who hit him. He's now back in the race, by the way, Delaca too, having repaired the front of the Triumph. Moss, of course, who wasn't driving, didn't blame him, said absolutely accidental, he couldn't have avoided it, hitting Jack Braden, who was stuck on the grid with the car caught in both gears. There's Bob Morris.
Again, going back to the Bob Morris deal, I think I told you before that he's got a car which slides a lot at the back end to keep the axles from getting too much strain. On top of this, the other different thing that he's done on this car is to run Dunlop tyres against what has become almost traditional Bridgestones on the Tiranas. The second thing is, rather than going for the very big brakes on it as Harry Firth, he's in fact gone for what is almost a smaller brake. His argument being that the way in which these brake pads have been wearing out previously is they've been getting too hot and too cold. By the time the brakes enter the final braking off the main Conrod straight, they're stone cold, they get very hot indeed. So what he's gone is for smaller brakes, holding the temperature more constantly, and he thinks that this is the way to go. So we've got 2 very interesting technical battles in the brakes.
In the battle we saw at the very beginning of the race being resumed now, car 5, Peter Brock and Bob Morris, who chased him at the start. Now, Brock went to the lead of the race only to run out of fuel when a fuel line broke and left him stranded on the circuit. Lost about 6 laps getting back, but fixed. Now back in contention, and Bob Morris trying desperately to get by the Bob Skelton car and having a bit of trouble. Just can't get round. He wants to rejoin the battle with Peter Brock. And cars are fairly similar under acceleration. He's not getting by, but now he's alongside at least. The flags are out from the flag marshals, and the Skelton car moves across just to tuck in behind Bob Morris, decides he can go just as quickly and pulls out to the right. So the 2 of them go side by side.
Meanwhile, down to the pits, the Holden dealer car number 8, the second of their cars, has come in and out of the pits again. That car's been in about 3 or 4 times over the past hour. They obviously have some sort of running problem that allow them to get back into the race, but not competitively.
Bob Morris running second. Bob Skelton running about 7th. Car through the next right. Morris is sharing the drive with John Fitzpatrick from England. They're going very hard, as you can see. He doesn't want to let Peter Brock out of his sight. He's got a bit of leeway to play with because Brock is behind in distance, although ahead on the road. And behind that pair is Sterling Moss in 17. Used in the pits, by the way, that the Brian Negus car, which has been in trouble a few times. In fact, they came into the pits 4 times. Now the message is that they're using excessive oil. They've just had to pit for a 5th time. That's the second Holden dealer team car, and Harry Firth will be keeping his fingers crossed that the same thing doesn't apply to Colin Bond, who's out in front. The Ford Challenge has expired, only 1 Falcon left. The retirement of Alan Moffat, crankshaft pulley having broken, all the bonding and wheezing lines are there by Bob Morris, punishing the car quite considerably. I don't know how much of that it can take. John Davison, your thoughts on that? He was going pretty hard and really giving the suspension a bit of a hammering through there.
Oh, I think the only thing that would give a considerable hammering to is really the tyres. I think the suspension in these cars is designed to take the sideways centrifugal force. But the only time it would upset it could be either in punctures by putting the wheel on the edge, and that could also upset the wheel alignment as well. But I don't really think it'd do the suspension a bit. What's your thoughts on that, Alan?
Exactly. We had, 3 years development on these cars now, and they don't have items such as that fall off without any sort of real knowledge of the deal. So I don't see that being a problem. I think, again, we've got this set pattern by this car in which they are taking their times, and instead of them being rushed pit stops, they're almost routine service items, and then go out and drive the car hard. So again, we have this tactical, this strategy situation. The Holden dealer team is running the more traditional race, and not quite so hard on quick pit stops versus service and hard running.
Bob Morris in 2nd place. Colin Bond leads the race. Off from the Hardy Ferretto in a minute. Can we go for a class and look at some of the cars, maybe the 2-litre cars or something?
Go for the 3-litre cars.
Okay, right.
I'd like to see the 3-litre cars on outright.
Can we have the 3? Can we put the headphones on and we'll listen? Can we have the 3-litre cars?
First 10 places.
Class. 3-litre class.
And their outright positions.
Sorry, I can't hear you. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Again, Phil. Right. No, okay, right. Which one is it? Yeah, about his history, what he did and how he did it. Yep. Not the why you're going so fast one. Wouldn't mind following Sterling Moss at some time too. He's the one that people want to see, I think. 17. He's just behind them.
Gee, who's driving the Brock car? Phil Brock or Peter Brock?
Phil is.
He's driving it very well.
Yes, he is. You're coming through so loud and clear, Phil, we can hear you breathing.
Run a bearing.
That's Golson and
We have there with the Dolomite, the Ron Hodgson car, just in front of his teammate. This is Bob Morris. Bad news about the other Dolomite, the Endras car, which was actually leading the Triumph contingent and running 3rd in the class. It's pulled into the pits. It looks like it's a retirement with a bearing gone. That's bad luck for the Ray Golson, James Lang Pete's team. This is Bobby Morris, though, just having gone by the Ron Dixon Dolomite, which is now the head of the Triumph queue, although they're not leading the class. That still belongs to Eric Bullock for South Australia in the RS 2000. But Bobby Morris driving very vigorously. He's got Philip Brock in the Peter Brock car up in front of him. And Philip Brock's driving that car very smoothly, very well. Morris unable to really make an impression on him.
It'd be very interesting to put the clock on Philip Brock, actually, to see how Philip is doing with regard to his driving ability, and B, with regard to the car now, which is starting to get quite tired. So,
well, actually, I put a watch on Philip Brock some 2 laps ago, and he did a 2 minutes 30, which is only a second outside what he did in practice. So he's driving very well indeed.
It's an
I'll clock him again on this lap just to substantiate that. Actually, we were talking about the brakes that he used here. One of the biggest problems, or the two big problems that they do confront in braking here, and that of course is they mustn't use the brakes too hard because they either experience fade or the brake fluid boils. Now the boiling point of the brake fluid that they usually use in this race, Howard, is about 550 degrees Fahrenheit. But the disc temperatures themselves can get up to anything to 1,000 degrees Celsius, and they've got to be very careful that they don't get too much temperature into the brake fluid, cause it to boil, and that's exactly what causes loss of pedal pressure.
What they do to hold down that disc brake temperature, people may have heard of ventilated discs, in which the disc, in fact, the center of the disc is hollow with veins in it, and this allows air to be flown out from the center of the disc, taking the temperature with it. And this is one of the big developments that they're finding overseas, is they're now coming up with disc brakes that are about 1 1/3 inches wide, and they act just like air pumps. So they dissipate the heat that way.
Bob Morris has been driving here so long, we tend to forget he's still a fairly young fellow. So let's have a chat to Bob Morris and find out a little bit more about the driver of car number 7.
You're 27, Bob. That's been a fairly successful age for a lot of drivers at Bathurst.
Yes, Colin Bond won this race when he was 27. Peter Brock won it when he was 27. Fred Gibson won it when he was 27. And I was 27 the day before the race last year, so I thought it was my year last year. But luckily I'm not 28 until the day after the race this year, so we've got 2 goes at it virtually.
You've got one more day left.
One more day.
You've been driving for a long time. When you began, you were what, 17, 10 years ago?
I was 17, I had my first race at Oran Park.
What was that in?
That was in a Cortina. It was a Cortina that my father had prepared for the 65 Hardy Ferrado, or the Bathurst 500 as it was then. And it was quite a successful car, coming second in Class A. And then I raced it after that in club events, hill climbs, and that started me on my motor racing career.
Now, your father was a famous racing driver. Did that inspire you to take up the sport, or what got you going?
Well, it was a good lead-up, Evan, because I'd had an introduction to the sport. He'd been a top go-karter, he'd been an Australian champion several times, and it was natural that I progressed to motor racing. And I had a few lucky breaks. I was introduced to the AMI Works team very early in the piece, and I drove for Bathurst for them, and we won Class A 2 years in a row.
Yeah, you seem to have a lot of success very early on. Now, often, when people have early success, it's hard to become accustomed to the grind that very often follows. How's it been in your case?
It's a long road to hoe, but I'm very thankful to Ron Hodson, my sponsor. This is my 5th year with him now, and we've shared a lot of successes, and he's been a very good sponsor to me and a great inspiration.
You're married. Does your wife worry about you driving so quickly?
No, because she realises that we do everything in a lot of safety. I wouldn't like to drive an open wheeler for this very reason, but a touring car feels very safe, and we take every precaution. And I'd never do anything that I thought was unsafe.
Have you ever thought of doing anything else apart from being a racing driver?
Oh, well, I do a lot of things. I ski. I used to be a competitive water skier and snow ski, and had a go at everything, skin diving and kite flying, and you name it, I've sort of had a go at it.
What do you do for a living?
I've got a car air conditioning business at Caringbah, and that keeps us going nicely in between motor races.
Bobby Morris, car 7, running second. In the pits, car 6, Max Stewart, who's blown an oil line, the man who also blew a brake line earlier, so the lines aren't very good for Max today. He had a big spin where Jack Brabham had a spin yesterday. No damage to the car, but the more loss of time for car 6. Of another good car to pass, and a signal from Wayne Negus, is it, driving from Western Australia, indicates that Bob Morris should pass on the left. Bob's having a bit of a job doing it because the Holden dealer team car is going pretty quickly, but Wayne will probably tuck across to the left and get a tow as they go down Conrod Straight. 1.7 kilometres long, this straight being resurfaced. Bathurst City Council very keen on promoting racing here at Mount Panorama, realising the amount of good it does for local business and the way that this year's race, particularly with the participation of Sterling Moss and Jack Brabham, has focused world interest on their centre. Morris has Negus hard on his tail. Negus remembers this corner well. When he first came here, he put the car right into the fence. He's learned a lot since then.
Actually, Evan, on the point of the benefit to the township of Bathurst that the Hardy Ferrito has, which I think is unquestionable, the benefit it must have, not only in generating business to the local proprietors here, but also to the public relations outlook of people actually knowing where Bathurst is and what it stands for and what it has to offer. The Benalla Auto, or the Benalla Auto Club, which runs the Winton circuit at Benalla in Melbourne, have approached the Formula 5000 drivers, the Formula 1 group in Australia, to run a race called the Rose City 10,000. It's called the Rose City 10,000 because it's going to be run in conjunction with the Rose Festival held annually in the township of Benalla every November. And they've approached all the Formula 1 drivers in Australia to compete in this event. We're very excited about it. The club themselves have gone to a great deal of trouble to, in fact, improve the amenities in the circuit. The surface of the circuit is very, very good indeed. And, you know, I think that it's unquestionable the benefit that motorsport can have on these towns, especially if they're country towns.
Well, the driver who's probably focused more interest on Bathurst than anyone else, Sterling Moss, working away on the rather badly damaged at the rear Tirana, rammed on the starting line when Jack Brabham had gearbox failure. The car selected 2 gears at once, he couldn't move, and coming to, he was rammed in the back. The car's had a new suspension put in the back, a new tank put in the back. They had to change the gearbox that caused the trouble in the first place. Jack has been out and had a run in the car, only fairly briefly to make sure it was right. Handed over to Sterling Moss, who is now going around, bodywork flapping a bit at the back, but I think enjoying himself. Howard Marsden?
Yes, I think that we'll see Sterling Moss run again somewhere else in the world. I think one of the things that has surprised Sterling is, I would say, when the offer first was given to him on the telephone, he had no idea how quick the cars are nowadays in Australia. I think he felt that it was a long-distance saloon car race and would allow him to very easily get himself back into motorsport. Hasn't turned out that way. I think with what's happened today, I think he's got the flavour of it all again. I'd love to see him go again somewhere else in the world.
I think he'd like to. He was suggesting he wouldn't mind running in 1 or 2 of the classic long-distance races. While we watched Sterling, he gave just a little comforting dab on the brakes then. Let me run through the positions among the outright cars when 94 laps have been covered. Watching Sterling Moss, who of course doesn't figure in these laps, as they lost several hours repairing the car to get it back on the track, to keep faith with the people who wanted to see it as much as to give them a run themselves. But that's Moss, and the leader is Colin Bond with John Harvey in the Marlborough Holden dealer team car. They were 2 laps clear of Bob Morris and John Fitzpatrick in car 7, who were on the same lap, although now they have lapped him, Charlie O'Brien and Wayne Negus. We saw Morris get by, explains why he was anxious to get in front of the second Holden dealer team car, because he now has a buffer of another 1 lap. 1 lap behind, the man who ran out of petrol, Peter Brock, Philip Brock driving and driving very skillfully. They were, in fact, 3 laps behind Colin Bond and only 1 behind Morris and O'Brien, so well and truly back in contention. Bob Skelton in car 3 with Alan Hamilton. He is 4 laps behind the leader. Then we have Peter Jansen and Kevin Bartlett, another 1 lap back and 5 behind the leader. A remarkable effort because they've had so much trouble. They've been in the pits half a dozen times to try and sort things out, and the car is still going. The first Falcon is in 7th place. Murray Carter and Ray Winter, they're 5 laps behind the leading car. And then car 14, Bob Forbes and Russ McRae in another Tirana. That's the brown and gold Andronicus car on 89 laps, which is 5 behind. 2 laps ahead of the laps totally covered by Alan Moffat and Bern Shipman before Moffat retired the car with a broken pulley on the crankshaft. He's out, and he was, in fact, 1 lap clear of John Gosser and Jim Richards, who are, in effect, out of the race, being in the pit area, possibly attempting to change the clutch, which failed. They were the leading 10 placings, and a fairly sad picture towards the end when 2 of the top 10 are, in fact, out of the race.
We have an even later set of results coming up now, which I'll read out, and I think the major differences come through again. In first place, we've got Bond Harvey. Second place, we've got Morris Fitzpatrick. Third place, we've got O'Brien and Negus. Fourth place, Brock Porrock. Fifth place, Skelton Hamilton. Sixth place, Jansen Bartlett. And here's the interesting one. 7th place, for the first time into the first 10, comes the Ford Capri of Seaton and Smith. So the 3-litre cars are starting to get to the big ones on the reliability factor.
I had the class result, you've got the outright, so we have a Capri in the top 7. In 7th. That is interesting. That was what he was doing last year. He ended up in 4th before he lost a wheel. Sterling Moss, though, at the wheel. at Bodyworth. I don't think it's a result of any brush on the circuit. I'm not quite sure what the wave of the hand meant. I think he wanted a line there and he wanted the man in front to get out of the way.
Now, the wave was in fact to the flag marshal. And so he was telling the flag marshal with the blue flag to give the warning to the man in front to get out of the way.
Actually, Howard, you and I were speaking earlier this morning about men that are gifted to be good, are really good at things.
And the man who's been good at things, or away from it a long time, is Sterling Moss. One of the men who made this the great race, the Hardy Ferodo 1000.
Coming in.
None of us can hear you, Phil. We had to get our cue from IBM.
Howard?
Can't hear you. Sorry. Is Phil talking?
No, we can't hear you.
No, I'm sorry. Is Phil talking? No.
I am just hearing you now, Phil, but only just as it's clear. Right, the IBM headset to Evan.
Yeah. Right. I've got no microphone with. That's the only problem. Different sort of plug, is it? Will it reach?
No.
That's the time that Moss did on that last lap. Here, we've turned it up as much as we can. Yep.
That's much better. No, go back to the others, Evan. Just.
Yeah, who's talking? Yes, it's better. Yep.
Just a second. Yeah, the gain's right up now, Phil.
Yeah, I can hear you. Oh, great, yes.
Right.
All right.
He'll be across the top, Phil, and he's coming into the pits next time round.
Mightn't be bad.
Actually, he did about a 2:34 then. I think that's a bloody good time for him, considering that car's biffed.
I wouldn't get near it. I mean, I wouldn't get in the car.
Wouldn't you?
Not in that car.
Peter, it's Phil Brock coming in too. Yeah, Phil Brock. We cover this first. What do you think?
I think we ought to.
Sterling Moss coming round past the pit area, circulating pretty rapidly, 2 minutes 34 seconds, which is very fast for a car in the condition of that much mangled Tirana. Sterling Moss, the golden boy of racing, the man who's brought so much glamour to this race, and the man who must have been so disappointed when Jack Brabham was shunted at the very start of the race on the starting line. But what sort of man is Sterling Moss, and what might he have been?
Was there ever any chance you'd be anything but a racing driver?
Yes, I tried to be a dentist, but I wasn't smart enough, and so because I was a bit thick, I thought I'd better be a racing driver. Actually, I should have been a dentist. My father was a dentist, but I was fairly good at riding horses, I suppose. But I don't like them because they don't respond to the controls in the correct way. They're rather like a car with a flat tire, you know.
How did you first get involved in racing?
I first got involved because my father raced as an amateur, and my mother did Charles Field Times rallies, and therefore I was brought up with fast cars. My father, I remember, used to pick me up from school in a 2.3 supercharged Alfa, you know, and there was always nice machinery like that around, and therefore I learned to steer, should I say, when I was 6, and I had my first car on the farm when I was 10, and so I was brought up with them, but my father was against it, you know. I ordered my first racing car with money I'd won from riding horses, you know, show jumping, and he found the checkbook and immediately closed my account, took the money away, said, look, boy, you know, you've had it go out and ride a bicycle.
A few famous drivers, such as yourself, have made illustrious careers because you started very early. Yet others, like Graham Hill, have started very late. Is there any golden rule as to where you should start?
Well, there's always exceptions to every rule. I personally think, and I think even today more than ever, you need to start early. I think you need to start when you're young, when your threshold of fear, in other words, you know, your intelligence or understanding of what's the other side of the bank is much higher. I think the young men are obviously usually have more stamina. And I think really that one should try to start at 17. Then you need 5 years experience really, and then you know an awful lot. And by the time you're 23 or 4, you know, you're into it, and I think that is obviously an advantage. But there's an exception like Fangio, 47 world champion, best driver. What are you going to say?
You were reputed to have exceptional eyesight. How important is this sort of attribute?
I did have exceptional eyesight. It's not quite as good as it was. I think it's a great help. The point is, it isn't just how far you can see. That's for picking out pretty girls. But I think it's how quickly you can change your focus from say, the end of the straight, which may be 300-500 yards, to the instruments and back again. I think that is what matters, is the instantaneous change from one to the other.
What would you regard as being the highlights of your career?
I think, if you mean by that my best races, I think without doubt Monaco 1961 and Nürburgring 1961 and the Mille Miglia in 1955 in a sports car, and that one really only because it was an open road and I didn't really know the circuit, and I think I was a bit crazy to do it. Like this one, actually.
I was going to ask you, you've had several weeks to think over the decision. Today's race day, you're out in the circuit. What sort of misgivings have you had in the intervening weeks?
Terrible. But they came to a head when I got here, when I drove the car, when I realized my limitations, when I'm apprehensive still. In fact, I'm still apprehensive until the race is over as to how much I can beat down those limitations, how much I can overcome my natural resistance, because the technique of driving on these big tires is quite different as it was before, and I've got to, where I would lift off, I've now got to put my foot down, and that takes courage. Not only courage, but it takes you know, experience, and I suppose a feeling of confidence, and that is something that only comes with mileage, and I've only done probably 2 or 3 hours at the most in a car since 15 years ago, and that's not really enough.
Does travelling with cars of such different size and such different speed potential on the circuit worry you?
Yes, it does. I'm quite honestly, I'm appalled at the lack of manners of many of the drivers here. I believe if you're going to be passed, you look in the mirror and you see somebody, and I think you should sacrifice your lap to an extent, unless you're actually dicing with somebody, and wave the guy through. Then you doesn't lose much time. But to see an obviously faster car, which I've seen today, not me, and I'm not referring to myself because I'm not really as fast as I'd like to be, but when a guy who's really quick, like Alan Moffat or Bond or somebody, comes up behind a slower car, I think the least they should do is back off and give him the road. But it doesn't seem to happen nowadays, and I think the speed differential is very dangerous, particularly on the straight, because if two guys are having a race and they don't look in their mirror when they should, it could be quite dangerous, yes.
If you do well today, what lies in the future for Sterling Moss?
Big party. I suppose if I do well, I would like to hope that I might be able to do 1 or 2 races of this type that's on road circuits like this, which is sensational, in a year. You know, sports car grand touring, but certainly not Formula One, which I think is the greatest racing, but I'm not really ready for that, that's for sure.
Thank you. Sterling Moss, and the car we're following through now, car 30. Goes with her is Russell Skate, who has a very similar colour scheme to Sterling Moss, following through, as you can see. Skate just, in fact, about 200 metres in front of Moss. Glances across the pits. A bit of a wobble from the car there. Comes round the first bend again.
Evan, if I just may remark, I think that Sterling Moss in this car is doing the most fantastic job. He has recorded quicker times in this car in a bent condition than he recorded in official practice yesterday.
We have Peter Brock in the pitch with Kerry Lucken, so over to you, Kerry.
Well, Peter Brock, you've had certainly bad luck today. You're leading, going very, very well. What happened?
Quite simply, the fuel pickup pipe is broken in the tank, leaving about 8 gallons in there. So that, in fact, we're running with an effective 22-gallon tank instead of about a 28-gallon tank, or 29-gallon tank it should be, which means that it ran out of petrol down the straight. I thought the accelerator linkage had fallen apart because the accelerator was jammed on the floor. I hopped out to fix that up, gave it a few knocks and noticed there was no fuel coming out the accelerator pumps, and hopped back in it and it was bogged, and I had to push it out of there, coasted into the pits, lost about 3 laps in that episode, and I could have just coasted in, perhaps lost 10 seconds. So I'm kicking myself. but it was just a malfunction we didn't realise about.
Yes, well, you certainly had a very famous running out of fuel episode a few years ago, which we perhaps better not go into right now. Peter, the fact that you can't rely on getting all of the 28 or 29 gallons, does this affect the pit stops? Are you going to have more pit stops?
Yes, we have to stop, I think it's another, well, one long one and one very quick short one between now and the end of the race, more than we planned. We planned only one, it looks like two long stops and a very short one before.
You've got your young brother Splitpin running with you for the first time. You must be pleased.
Very pleased. He's at the moment he's lapping at 2 seconds lap faster than any other Tirana on the track. He's lapping around about 2 minutes 29, 2 minutes 29.5, and he's fixed up Bobby Morris there. He's pulling 2 seconds lap off Bondi, and we're probably running a place now. It's unfortunately before we were about a minute in front before we ran out of petrol, and we'd be looking real good by now.
When Philip just had his quick pit stop, you pointed out to me some mysterious yellow paint on the front wheel. What was that?
It looked mysteriously like the same yellow from Bob Morris's bodywork. Bob Morris wasn't giving him much of a room there for a while. I think Phil lent on him a bit around the top of the mountain somewhere.
Well, young Philip's obviously not giving in to the old timers. It's really great.
Oh no, he's not to be fooled with that split pin.
Well, best of luck for the rest of the race, and hopefully you can pull back quite a few more seconds, which will in turn lead to a couple of laps.
Well, we can only hope so, Kerry. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's split pin, Philip Brock, a very tall, gangling, but not to be fooled with, brother of Peter Brock. And behind him, you'll see the yellow Tirana, Bob Morris, still in there battling, and in fact, in front of him, and oh, nice. Really severe sort of tail, so he caught it very well, though.
Says great things for the preparation of this car, that apart from the problem that Peter had, that they have really driven this car very, very hard. And it's standing up to it. Philip's not fooling about that. He's going as quickly now as he's ever done in this particular car, and it's standing up very well indeed. So they're to be congratulated from that point of view.
The Kevin Bartlett, Peter Jansen Tirana was the car behind us, saw the yellow paint and thought of the yellow paint on Phil Brock's car and thought it must have been car 7, but it's not, it's car 15. About to come in view as they come down here, maybe a matter of 30 metres behind Philip Brock, now braking. Go around Murray's corner, you can just see the yellow car at the top. Philip Brock doing everything right. You're watching the great race, the Hardy Ferodo 1000.
Howard?
Yes.
I think Sterling Moss is doing a bloody fantastic job.
I think Evan's quite right. He's right.
Wayne Negus in car 8, we believe, yes.
I'll check for you if you like, Phil.
If we can get an outright run through IBM. Can you hear me, Maggie? No, you can't. No, we haven't got any headphones to IBM. You can't hear me? No. First 10.
Bill Berry, you there?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
What about that side? That's the retirements in numbers. And some of them, they're the ones that aren't running at the moment.
Yes, it's Wayne Negus.
Including the ones I know will definitely come back.
Yes. The ones who retired.
Oh,
Ron Gillard in the Alpha. Yeah. Yeah. Well, parked rather untidily there with the skid marks showing how it all happened. The Gil Gordon Alpha entry of Ron Gillard, Graham Harrison. It's a 1.9 litre Alpha GTV. He's got it all together to get the wheels to go. He may have a little bit of flat rubber on the tyres, though, I suspect, from the look of those marks on the road, which preceded him parking over there. Now he's away. Plenty of wheel spin. back on the track, and no more than his pride has suffered in that little mishap. One of 4 GTV Alphas, one of which is running closest in contention to the class, which has been led by the South Australian escort. They're very good. The outright 10 placings with 105 laps covered. It's still Colin Bond and John Harvey. They're on the 105 mark, which is 2 in front of car 7. They're in car 1, of course. Car 7, which is the Morris Fitzpatrick entry, in 103 laps. Then the Brock brothers in car 5, 1 lap behind in 102 laps. They are 1 lap clear of the 4th place getter, Charlie O'Brien and Wayne Negus. Wayne Negus driving at the moment in 4th place and doing a great job. A rather happy, carefree young fella from the west, and had rather a troubled path to the top. This is how he tells it. Driving for the Holden dealer team, he must feel like the prodigal son returned home.
Yes, there's probably more to that than most people realise.
What's the story?
Oh, Harry and I have had our disagreements in the past. I worked with him for 18 months. We didn't always see eye to eye. We had a bit of a disagreement before the 1974 Bathurst when I drove with Bob Forbes. We managed to get second there and beat Harry, and that was enough for me. So evidently the hatch has been buried and we're all friends again.
When did you start in motor racing and where?
Oh, I started in Perth, of course. That's where I come from. I built a Clubman. It was my first attempt at sort of having a go. I used to do gymkhanas and things like that before that. I had a Mini. Then I went to circuit racing seriously in a lightweight Mini. I think it was one of the first ones. I built that about 1964. Then I sold that. I took that to the Speedway, raced that at Speedway and created quite a stir in Perth because it was a small car against all the big cars. And then I run a GT HO Falcon at the Speedway. The Speedway in Perth is very popular. I'm still involved a little with Speedway. Cams don't like it very much, but there's not much they can do about it. Then in 1972, I bought an XU1, 202 XU1, and prepared that and ran that with a fair amount of success in Perth. We brought that to Bathurst in 72. It was a wet race, the first hour and a quarter was anyway. I lasted an hour and a quarter and then hit the fence at the bottom of the straight. We were running Formula Ford wet tyres because I couldn't get any tyres, and of course it was broke, had no money. But we managed to hold 5th place up till that time, which seemed to impress Harry. Then he offered me to come across here and work with him and get a drive with him. This was back in 1972. So he said I was wasting my time in Perth, so I came across, worked for Harry. As I said, we stayed there for 18 months, left there as we're based in Melbourne, went to Sydney for a further 12 or 13 months, working for Topco, which was in 1974 Bathurst. And then went back to Perth mainly because I had a sister who died of cancer last December. It was a bit tragic. But I think if I stayed in Sydney another 6 months, I might not see me back on the West. But I'm back over there now, running a L34 Tirana over there in our radial class. The car is identical to the car we're running today, except it runs on 7-inch wide wheels with radial flow tyres, and they get a bit hairy. But I think it's taught me a lot because I'm a little bit less exuberant now. We're leading the West Australian point score for the radial class over there at the moment, and everything's sort of looking rosy. And then I think it was the June meeting at Wanneroo. They brought over all Eastern States guys, Gricey and Bondi and all the top names, and we managed to knock them off on the radials, and of course that tickled me, really. Then Harry rang me up and just out of the blue said, listen, what about driving our car? And I said, well, you know, great. And so here I am.
Here Wayne Negus is running in 4th place at the moment, in a very strong position, giving the Holden dealer team 2 cars in the top 4, which is not a bad sort of result. The Ford Challenge has virtually expired with the retirement of Alan Moffat in car 9 due to the crankshaft pulley disintegrating, and with John Goss in the pits, still working apparently on the clutch which failed. Let me run through very quickly for you cars which have retired so far from the race, or also at least so far out of contention due to slipping work in the pits that we may regard them as being out of the event. In the big car class between 3 and 6 litres, we have car 4, the Gowan Hindhoff engine developments, entry for duty-free stores, Bruce Hindhoff and Garth Wigston. They're out, as is Alan Moffat in car 9, and car 12, the Alan Grice, Frank Gardner Tirana for Craven Miles Racing. Those are the retirements in that class. In the 2 to 3 litre category, much more reliability being exhibited, considering there are quite a lot of cars there. just watching, I think it's probably Kevin Bartlett in 15, sharing the drive with Peter Jansen, just pulling past Philip Rock and suffering for it. It looks more like Peter Jansen with that sort of cornering. But let me go back to the retirements while we watch to see whether, if it is Peter Jansen, he does something about joining the list. In the 2 to 3 litre class, we have car 27, a retirement. That's the City Ford entry for Lacus Manticus, and Doug Chivers. Doug didn't get a drive. It was a fairly early retirement, the Capri. Car 32, the Headmod engineering entry for Laurie Nelson, and Nick Louie, who suffered all sorts of disasters. The first one to get biffed on the very first corner of the race when spun, and then was collected a little later by a Mazda, number 24, John Duggan. And then with Nick Louie driving, they collected the fence at the bottom of Conrad, and that really put them out of the race. No one hurt but the car more than the Little Savage. In what used to be Class B, that is the category from 1301 to 2 litres, the most severely contested and most numerous category in the event, with 25 starters. Quickly, I'll just run through those. We have car 36 out, the Orange City Leyland entry for David Selden, a Dolomite Sprint. Car 38 out, that's the Endrust Australia entry for James Langpeach and Paul Golson, with the bearing gone. No rust, but trouble with the motor. Car 49, the Brian Wood Ford entry for Jim Murcott and Rod Stevens, an Escort RS 2000. Car 52, which is the Alan Nuttall entry for Alan Nuttall himself and Richard Bailey, a Fiat 124 Coupe. Car 53, Lennox Motors, the Chris Heyer, Peter Lander Volkswagen Golf. A disappointment to all your VW fans. Car 57, Ralph Radburn in the BMW, both of them afflicted by dropping tappets of all things and rockers. They're out. He and Peter Williamson were to try and win the class in the BMW 2002. Car 58, Brian Foley, a sad retirement. There's Marie Claude Beaumont from front and Christine Gibson in the Alfetta GT. And car 61, Bob Williamson's Mini Factory, with Bob Williamson and Gary Cook in a smaller RX3 Mazda. There are the retirements for Class B, or the 2 litre class. Talking of retiring, one person who could never be considered to be a retiring character is the man who's in the pits now with Kerry Lumpkins. Oh, you have a reputation as an eccentric. Why?
That's a hard one to answer. I think you're either born that way or you're not born at all.
Do you work at it, or is it natural?
I'm afraid it's natural. I've been trying to work to get out of it, but it hasn't been any hope yet. I think at the age I am, there's not going to be any hope for it at all.
Tell me about where you live.
I live on the Windsor Hotel, on the top in a penthouse. If any of you don't know the Windsor, you better go and stay there. It's one of the loveliest old hotels in Australia. It's owned by the National, or we hope to one day, by the government, and it's classified with the National Trust. It's a very beautiful place. It's like the Dorchester of England.
But your quarters are a little different, Peter.
Yeah, slightly different. I think it's more the touch of Jansen in it. Some of the old fireplaces and the billiard room and places like that. It is a home. Home in the middle of the city, as one might say.
What else do you do apart from go motor racing?
Well, that's a good, hearty question. I play polo, which I'm very, very keen on. I point to point in Ireland every year for 2 months. And I also hunt there. And I find this takes up about most of my time.
When did you start motor racing?
When I was about 18.
Where was that?
I started in England. Wasn't very successful to start off. I think I've still got that same kind of fever pitch. I go a wee bit too hard. Maybe I'm mellowing now, and with Kevin Bartleton with me, maybe I'll go much better this year. Last year, as we were third at the end, and bang went the diff. They say I got a bit excited and carried away. Who doesn't get carried away?
How old are you, Peter?
Well, that's about 34. Going on to 35. One can only go up.
What sort of cars have you driven in your career?
A complete mixture, from Lotus, Ferrari, Maserati, Porsche, right down the rally cars, same as you, Evan. I suppose just about everything in the book. I think you get a complete mixture. If you're writing about cars and living cars, it's like horses. You try them, short one, fat one, skinny ones. Same as women, I suppose.
How about how about circuits? How does Bathurst rate on your scale of courses where you've taken part?
I think in the world it is one of the most exciting circuits in the world. It's a real challenge because you've got to be really with it to get used to every corner and to know every corner. It's not every corner, it's way over the top there. When you're getting around, going around the top there, and you've got a lot of little cars on the road fighting their way all over the place. You can't even get between them. You've really got to start thinking. And not only thinking, but to line up into your corner and everything. And the biggest thing is to try and just to keep that time up every lap, And this is very hard in a race like this with a lot of little cars around. Even some of the big cars get in your way.
But you're enjoying it.
I love it, otherwise I wouldn't be here.
Peter Jansen. There's no one quite like him on the circuit. A few more retirements very quickly. In the smallest class, up to 1.3 litres. The car's out from there. Car number 68, the Peter Max towing entry for Jeff Wade and Colin Campbell, both Victorians in a Ford Escort 1300. 69, the Ken Harrison Shell Sport entry for Ken and David Turnbull, both Victorians. David, in fact, a Formula V driver of some note in a Ford Escort 1300. They're out, as is the following number, car 70, Blackwood Cars. Bernie Stack from South Australia, a Formula V driver there. And Keith Poole, also from South Australia, in a Formula 5000, exponent in the VW Passat. They're out. And we'll be back soon with more action from the Hardy Ferodo 1000. Well, I don't know how he's going, but I wouldn't mind talking about it because he has the record for reliability. He's covered more laps than anyone else at Bathurst in the last 4 years. And you've got an interview too, haven't you, if you want to use that? They're running in 10th place.
Behind the 3 litre cars.
Beg your pardon?
Oh.
Sorry. Okay. Okay, got it. Got it. With me now, British international John Fitzpatrick. John, you're having a much better run this year than you did last year on your first trip to Bathurst.
Yeah, we certainly are. The car's going really well. You probably noticed at the start of the race how Bob just...
With me now, British international John Fitzpatrick, co-driving with Bob Morris in the Ron Hodgson L34 Tirana. John, you're having a much better trip to Bathurst this time than you did last year.
Yeah, I certainly am. The car's going really well. We're in second place. We're just over a lap behind. And Bob's coming in about 30 minutes, and I'll take over again, and then we'll run right through to the end. And we think Bond will have to make 2 more stops. And the car was really good last time I got out of it. Bob had taken it really easy at the start. He hadn't got involved with that initial dice, and the brakes were just like new. So we're hoping we can really go in the last hour and catch that extra bit up.
This obviously for a long distance race is very important. Do you think some of the other drivers didn't play themselves into the race as they might have?
Yeah, I think it's very easy to get involved in that first few laps. It's like a Grand Prix, the first 10 laps, and you've got to keep out of it. It's much easier to follow than it is to be ahead. You can follow and do the same lap times and be much easier on the car, and that's what Bob did. It was very good, and the car's really good now.
You're enjoying this Bathurst race?
Oh, yeah, I really am. It's nice to be in there instead of watching like last year.
The clouds are starting to come over a little. Do you think that if it does rain in the last hour or so of the race, this will have a great bearing on the final result?
I don't think so. I think Colin Bond's just as experienced as anybody else is in the wet, and it's just an inconvenience for the pit crew to change the tyres, but I don't think it'll affect the race.
Do you like the wet?
Yes, I don't mind. I'm used to it in England.
Hopefully it's not going to rain, but we hope we'll see you right up there at the finish, and perhaps bring a Ron Hodgson entry home for the first time.
Thanks, Kerry.
John Fitzpatrick, who first came to Australia as a much younger man in 1964 for BMC to drive a Mini with Paddy Hopkirk, of all people, in the 6 Hours of Sandown, one of the predecessors for this classic race. And the only Ford challenge left, Howard Marsden, the Murray Carter Falcon. Does he have any sort of chance at all?
No, the best thing that can happen to Murray is that half a dozen Tiranas in front of him fall over dead with their wheels in the air. And I don't think that's going to happen. Going back to John Fitzpatrick's last interview, I think they've got things a little bit messed up. According to the IBM computer, there's in fact 2 laps between Bond and their car.
The computer, by the way, I should stress, is newly fed information from the official ARDC lap scorers, the ARDC, Australian Racing Drivers Club, the people who actually run the meeting. So the official figure is the one that comes through the computer, and that does show a lap difference of 2, not 1.
So that may upset their calculations, but we'll see what comes out of it. I'm sure they'll be trying hard.
Bear in mind, of course, 2 laps can be 1 lap and 10 seconds, so it might be still a pretty close sort of contest. And the interesting point is the fact that they are going to make 1 less scheduled pit stop. That's where the race could be won or lost.
Going back to Murray Carter, I don't think many people need me to say that the bloke is a true Australian battler. He's a man who won't admit how old he is, and he always avoids that particular question. He's been around for a year and a day. Preparation this year has been better than I've seen it for some time for Murray. He's come up here with 3 engines, and although he did swap the engines a couple of times during practice, he's got the engine in he wanted, his race engine. Tyres, as per usual, are Goodyears. He's driving the car extremely well, realizing that he's got some brake problems. Even with these Falcons with the 4 wheel discs, they have to be very careful with the brakes. So both he and young Winter have done an excellent job to go as steadily as they have. The only thing is, it's really what we said at the earlier part of the race, that the sprinters that are out there, one of them always gets through nowadays, so you really do have to run the race here at Bathurst from the front, and running the way that Murray's run it, I'm afraid, has given him the possibility only of 4th or 5th place at the present stage.
Leading Falcon, of course, the one expected to win, the one that had been leading was Alan Moffat, who was out. He broke the crankshaft pulley, took it around to the back, but the official reason we've been given for the retirement was not the pulley, which they could have changed, but he had also blown a head gasket. So all sorts of troubles.
It's a matter of what comes first. The pulley and the fan belt may well have caused overheating, and then you lose your head gasket. So it's chicken and egg stuff, which does come first. In the pits at the present stage, we have the very pretty little Escort RS2000 of Bruce Hodson's, the De Bertolli Wines entry that has been pushed down the pits by Dave Morrow and the rest of the crew. So I don't know what's happened to them.
Well, we do know what's happened to Colin Bond, though. He is leading the race by 2 laps. He gives signs up on the top of the hill of having brake troubles, dabbling away at the brake pedal, as we noticed in one of the other cars before, so we'll follow him when he comes in. In the meantime, just quickly while we resume our pursuit of Murray Carter, John Davison, Murray is a very much, not so much underrated driver as unknown driver. Not a great deal is known about him.
Well, it's rather strange nothing is known about Murray Carter. He's always been one of those blokes that I think Howard Marsden's very ably verbally depicted. He's a true Australian battler. He looks like an Australian farmer. He's been driving for many, many years. In fact, he was a very, very competent driver in the late 50s and the very early 60s. And I can remember he ran an open sports car, a Chevrolet engine sports car, in the early 60s at Sandown and at Warwick Farm. And he used to, frankly, just blow everything to the weeds. He was a fantastic driver. Then he seemed to have died out of it for a long time, and no one really heard of Murray Carter. He may well have wanted to spend more time with his family or more time establishing his business in Melbourne. And then he's come back with this car, and of course he's had it repainted a number of times. And I do agree with Howard. I think this particular time he's come here with a better standard of presentation and certainly preparation. I think that probably is the reason why he's continuing to run around. He has been around a long time, and he is frankly a very good driver if given the best equipment.
Murray, unfortunately, has been out-glamorized, shall we say, by the Moffat and Goss people. These 3 running Ford loyalty for the past 5, 6, 7 years, whatever it is. It's been very good to see down in Victoria. Oh, who is this?
That's Moss Brabham.
Moss Brabham. They have lost an engine.
Yes, looks like the end of it. Sterling Moss at the wheel, I think. Yes, it's right.
There's a blow-up of monumental proportions.
He had been circulating so well. Now he's disappeared, as you can see. He's in there somewhere, just trying to find shelter in a very difficult part of the circuit around BP cutting. The brake lights come on, and it's almost the fog lights. He's trying to get out of the way. A very hazardous place to be setting up such a smoke screen.
Exactly, puffing clouds of smoke and smoke rings as well.
I would say that looks very similar to what happened to me at Iron Park 2 weeks ago. I'll tell you what, he ought to get out of that car and play wise, because trying to drive it around to the pits that looks to me like it's dropped a valve, put a hole in the piston and just blowing straight oil out the exhaust pipe.
I don't know whether he's trying to get to the pits or whether he's trying to find a place where he can park safely. It happened in a very awkward place for him. There were only the banks on his side.
The trouble is that with that much smoke, he can't see in his mirrors. He doesn't know what's going on behind him, so he must keep to the right, keep out of the way and get off the circuit as quickly as he can.
He's still going there, and he's still in a very vulnerable part of the track. There's someone trying to pass a message on to the great Sterling Moss. He says, well, I'd love to, fella, but where's the gate for me to go through to get into the fence? I know it's making it hard for you chaps, but the flag is not going to help the man behind Sterling.
Sterling really ought to stop that. He's getting, that's the oil flag that is first being shown to him.
See the battered tail that caused the problem. Oh, this is going to be hard for the other cars. It caused the problem for Jack Brabham, and now Sterling Moss with a blown motor and laying a cloud of smoke, which is going to cause quite a problem coming down through these S's.
Actually, you know, if it was a blown motor and it was as bad as it looks, I'm quite sure he would have stopped.
Well, it looks bad, but for whatever reason he's carrying on. Obviously now he's trying to get to the pits. There's much less oil now, whether he's just coasting down and let the motor die. It looks more likely. He's now got a little bit of momentum. Just running down. He'll almost get to the pits, in fact. Running along 1.7 kilometre straight. He's still running there. Another reason, of course, why he might be puffing that smoke is he might have nothing left to burn.
No, he's in neutral now. He's got over to the near side, which is what he wanted to do.
Colin Bond in the pits. Anxious looks on to the front now. He was running with the Demon brakes, and Harry Firth had developed very wide.
This was going to be the big secret. If they had to change brake pads, they could do it extremely quickly. It looks as if...
Kerry, what's going on?
Now, in the pits now with the Marlborough Holden dealer team, they're having a great amount of trouble getting the old, worn out and very, very hot, in fact almost red hot brake pads out. They've managed to get the two out of the right side, still having problems on the left-hand side of the car. Just getting the second of the right-hand side ones out. So you can see probably they're really hot. They've got the very big multi-grip pliers to push the twin piston back into the caliper so they can get the very, very thick new pad back in. This is a very, very difficult operation, having two men on it. This right-hand side much more difficult to get at. For some reason they must have expanded more, or some problem with removing them. As we mentioned earlier, they had this system down to a fine art, but obviously something's gone amiss. It's the lower or the foremost piston on the inside of the right-hand caliper that's giving the problems. They've got two pairs of multi-grips on it at once now to try and get this piston back in. They've got the piston in, the pad's being pushed in now, clips being put back on.
Moss has come into the pits just past you, Kerry.
Ready to go back on just as soon as they can. They've refueled, they've put 2 quarts of oil in the engine, but they've had this problem with the right-hand brakes.
Bobby Skelton in car 3, and just in front of him, while you're down in the pits there, Kerry,
we being fired up.
We have Ron Hodgson's car now gone past. Depending on whether they're 1 or 2 laps difference, he's either in the lead or on the same lap, but whatever it is, as Colin Bond now pulls out of the pits, we've got ourselves a real race on our hands, because these two drivers are on the same lap. Colin Bond with the Demon brakes that weren't going to give any trouble, had trouble. The go-go sign is given to him. And Bob Morris, who saw him in the pits, doesn't need any incentive. He is going, and watch Morris as he flies up the mountain. All the incentive a driver like Morris needs is the sight of his nearest rival in the pits up on a jack. Moss, by the way, before the engine blew up, was lapping consistently in 2 minutes 32 seconds. John Davison, remarkable driving.
Oh, gee, that's fantastic performance. It really is, because that car, there is no way known that that car with the shunt that took up the back could even be remotely fixed in a condition that would even remotely, any normal driver could have done that sort of time, and I'm quite sure that Howard Marston would agree with me. Oh, gee, I think that's a fantastic performance.
We're watching Bob Morris. We're talking about the time of Sterling Moss.
Rather than talking about Moss, the latest results or positions showed just before that pit stop that we were watching with the disc brake change for Colin Bond, showed that there was only one lap difference on this occasion, Bond and Fitzpatrick, or Bond and Morris as we must call them at the moment. If that is so, it would seem that we're now looking at the leading car. We're waiting for confirmation again of this when the next lot of results will come through in about 5 minutes' time. Whatever it is, it's a hell of a race, because again it would seem that they've both now got one more pit stop to do.
We saw the De Bertolli's Wine Escort being pushed in. The news is that Bruce Hodgson in fact broke a tail shaft. Both cars are on the same lap, official confirmation, which puts this car 7, in front. Bob Morris, still 27 with 1 day to go, and trying to match the record of other drivers who have won it in their 27th year, has a better chance than he'll ever have again. Morris around past the pit straight, and it'll be a critical signal he'll receive this time, showing him the position. He looks to see if Bond's still there. Bond's not there. Gets the pit signal, and off he goes. Kerry Daly tucks in behind in the little blue Escort. And it's the leader now, Paul Older, in the 3-litre BMW, who's going quite well in the 3-litre class.
And John Goss has just rejoined the race, which is a tremendous effort.
Indeed, they replaced an exhaust system as well as the clutch. They've been in the pits for a couple of hours. And it's Jim Richards driving the car for John Goss. Goes straight out, goes for his line as quickly as he can. And Richards, the great New Zealand driver, is now off a hopeless cause. But one thing that he might be after, and a thing to bear in mind, there is $1,000 and the Vane Trophy, a very handsome trophy we have to show you when the prize presentation goes on, for the man who makes fastest lap in the race. Now, $1,000 is just the sort of goal that a person who has no chance in the race could chase. Now, the man with the chance, of course, Bob Morris, who leads the race, and behind him, Jim Richards, who's as fast as anyone, has the probably extra goal of knowing that he can win $1,000 and the Vane Trophy if he can get fastest lap in this race. Conditions pretty good for fast driving at the moment. The Goss car, by the way, was in the pits for 1 hour and 26 minutes. Bob Morris took a 5-minute pit stop to start with, a long time in there to get, as Howard Marsden called it, regular maintenance. Just a proper service of the car. It seems to be paying off.
Just having a look at those brake pads that were thrown on the floor whilst Kerry was watching. These were the very thick brake pads. They look pretty worn out to me. So it's interesting to see that Morris yet has not run into trouble with what is supposedly a normal thickness of brake pad. I believe the difference comes here in that Morris is running what is known as 1103 material, which is extremely hard material, whereas Harry Firth's crew were running a softer material that was thicker.
One of the dangers, of course, of experimentation is you're not quite sure what's going to happen. Peter Brock was in no doubt that his brakes would last.
Well, of course, Peter Brock did the whole race last year on one set of brake pads, and they're only half worn by the end of it. So really, it's a lot of theory as to who believes what and why and how much you're getting paid to say it.
Well, we saw a great cloud of smoke from Sterling Moss. Kerry Luckins is down there, and he'll give us the reason.
Sterling Moss, a very disappointing, I imagine, return after 15 years to motor racing.
Yeah, it's a long time to wait for an anticlimax, isn't it? Yes, it was. Very disappointing. Unfortunately, there's something, I think a valve may have dropped now, I don't know. I was enjoying it, even though we were sort of 3 hours behind and I couldn't have any lap signals telling me how much the minus was. I was enjoying it, you know.
Sterling, you were lapping in something like 2 minutes 32 seconds, which I think was quicker than you went yesterday. Did you not have any reservations about a hurriedly rebuilt motor car?
I hadn't driven this car before. I'd only been in the old Nail and in the old practice car, and well, yeah, one has a few misgivings, of course, but felt all right, so I had a go.
You pressed on. What for the future?
I don't know. I'm going to have to go away and lick my wounds and see what I think. I don't know. I really don't know. I think that my times were, you know, fairly competitive considering the situation. So I don't think I did too badly. I could have done a lot better, but
if we can
I'm
just
reasonably happy.
If we can just break in, Kerry. Kerry, I wonder if we could just break in. We've got up on the course the signs of a biff on one of the leading cars, the Triumph, one of the leading 2-litre cars, the Triumph, the Ron Hodgson entry.
It's Graham Lawrence driving at the moment.
Graham Lawrence, the New Zealand driver, has done nasty things to the left-hand guard. He's not in a very good place to be getting out of the car. Graham, who suffered some pretty severe injuries in a crash in New Zealand at Pukekohe years ago, and in fact spent about 9 months in hospital nursing an injury. He has pins through the bone still there, and he's feeling a little bit rusty there, I think, but he's a little bit stiff. Has gone in there, coming down through Forest Hill, though.
Actually, Howard, I made a mistake. It's not Graham Lawrence.
All right, let's look at it. We might get the whole scene now while we were talking to Sterling. We were taping. Let's see if we can follow. The car being shared by Ron Dixon. I think it's Ron Dixon driving, as you were just suggesting then.
Yes, I look like Graham Lawrence as well.
Yeah, the limp is fairly fresh. Ron Dixon. Parking the car there. A bit early on, yes, it's Ron.
He deserves to get a parking ticket there.
Yes, not a good place to leave it. The flag marshal will be pretty busy. Obviously by the sore leg, not very happy. What happened, he went apparently across the road, hit the bank, and then bounced back into this position here, and then in some pain from that left leg, which must have made it very hard for him to drive the car and park, left of car there. That'll have to be moved pretty quickly, because that's a pretty nasty place, particularly when a whole horde of cars come over the top. The marshals are out, the flags are warning there's an obstruction on the road. In the meantime, Kerry Luckins is still in the pits with Sterling Moss.
Well, unfortunately, we've lost Sterling for a moment. He's gone back to have a look at the mechanics working on the car to just see if they can make some Pete Robinson repair and perhaps get him out to just do a few more laps. To the boys back in the main commentary, Evan, Howard and John, it's starting to rain reasonably heavily here. You might like to take it back and give us some comments about the attitudes of the cars on this, what is going to very soon be a fairly wet track, I feel.
Good, thank you. We should point out the wet back, though, on Sterling Moss is not due to the rain, but due to the perspiration of a great effort. An effort which has ended the great comeback in the great race, the Hardy Ferodo 1000. Run up some classes, I think.
That's right. I agree.
Is the outright or class?
Outright. Oh no, well, it's both in fact.
One together?
Yes,
yeah.
Here's the Jansen car.
I wonder if we could pick up some of the other classes, not necessarily the leader, just to run through some. We haven't, for instance, touched the A class or the 1300 class. We should look at the Civics or something. They're doing rather well, Honda Civics. You have anyone with them. We'll get an IBM run through on the Class A in a while, maybe. Class A later? Yeah, I think on the screen.
Brock. Yeah.
Brock's in.
Peter Brock in a bit now.
Peter. It's raining all right. Look.
Barry Seaton, having used all his skills for his 39.5 years. You can see the wet track there, still on slicks. You can see he's trying to economise by lifting wheels. I don't think that was an intention, but he is going very hard, and the track is greasy. Fairly dangerous stuff. The wipers are on. He's certainly aware the rain's there, but he's not slowing down. He's a Class C car, or the 3-litre car. One of the dominant drivers didn't win the series at Amaru Park this year as he did last year in such convincing fashion. Was beaten in the end by Alan Grice in the Mazda RX-3. Just going past the Ron Dixon abandoned Dolomite.
Whilst we're watching him go round, two of the Tiranas are actually in the pit. We've got the Janssen car in, which I think is in for a routine service, but the Brock car's coming, which I think is a little bit too early. And I think Peter's getting back out in there.
While we watch one of the 3-litre cars down the straight, let me just quickly run through the first 5 place getters. When the leader, car 7, Bob Morris and John Fitzpatrick, had covered 117 laps. It's all Tiranas. Colin Bond and John Harvey also 117. 2 laps in front of the Brock brothers, who are now in the pits, and that gap is going to be stretched, and their race is likely to be lost unless trouble afflicts these 2 leaders. They're on 115 laps. And then a good effort. The Charlie O'Brien Wayne Negus car, number 8, the second Holden Deal team car, is 4th. And bearing in mind they've been in the pits 5 times, that's a remarkably good effort. And another car that's in the pits at the moment, the Peter Jansen Kevin Bartlett Tirana, is 1 lap behind them. And they're the leading 5 cars in outright categories. Gary Seaton. We might get an IBM run-through on the 3-litre cars to see just where Seaton is running in the Class C or 3-litre cars.
Also, it would be interesting to cross to Kerry Luckins to find out what is the wrong with the Brock car in the pits.
Harry Carter in, and running about 7th place at our last count. Doesn't figure in the first 5 at the moment, but certainly the leading Ford. If you missed the earlier part of the telecast, Alan Moffat, when going great guns, stopped at around 12:45 with a broken pulley on the crankshaft. Took it to, the first thing they noticed was a broken fan belt. Then they found the broken pulley. Then when they took it around the back, they also found that a head gasket had blown and the car has been retired. The John Goss Jim Richards car is out on the circuit at the moment, but lost over almost an hour and a half changing a clutch. So the Ford threat has virtually expired. Murray Carter being the last one still out there in the pits at the moment. They're still out there with a chance, but too far back unless a lot of them trip and fall over, a lot of the fast Tiranas. It's going to be a Holden year. Murray Carter in the pits, relaxed. More than we can say for the mechanic at the front who's struggling with something.
I think Kerry Luckins in the pits now with Peter Brock, and they've had the bad luck to break a rear axle. They've been lucky enough to get the offending broken part in the inside of the diff in the sun gear area. They've been able to get that out very, very quickly. They're just fitting a new axle, putting it in, the 4 retaining bolts in the carrier just going on now.
Kerry, the broken axle has been something of a problem with Tiranas, hasn't it?
Certainly very bad luck for the Brock car. It's been going so reliably. Everything, of course, very, very hot. Just having some problems now in the rush and bustle, of course, of trying not to lose time. In fact, they are losing time.
Kerry Luckins, it's Howard Marsden. Can you hear me?
I think Kerry down there in a very noisy area. Can you hear us now, Kerry?
No, obviously he can't hear.
All fingers and thumbs, unfortunately, the crew. I don't know whether you can pick this up. There's a tremendous amount of noise going on here. So they've got the something binding, obviously. There might be still some small piece of metal inside that's binding it. They just can't get it to seat in properly. Very bad luck. A very disappointed Peter Brock, already having taken over the driving wheel and been buckled up, having taken over after a great drive by younger brother Philip. Now lost quite a deal of time, unfortunately. The rest of the car just going so very, very reliably. But in motor racing, of course, it can be anything, as we saw Bo Seaton tell us earlier. Just a 2-bit little bearing or oil seal that put him out of contention in his 3-litre Capri last year. With me now, very bad luck for Peter Brock. Kevin Bartlett, you're going well. We've got Peter Brock here with axle problems.
Well, we broke one earlier on, actually, and that was our little bit of bad luck.
Well, how's your car performing at this stage?
Oh, it's absolutely fantastic. The we're taking it so easy with it. It's, you could drive it all day, I think. I mean, all day, flat out.
You put Peter Jansen, the #1 driver, back in the seat for the last couple of hours.
Hey, what's this #1 driver business?
The noise here is unreal. I just hope you're picking up some of what we're able to tell you. They're still having many dramas trying to get this axle back in the Bill Patterson, Peter Brock car. I'll just try and get a closer look to see what success. Yes, they've got a couple of the studs through. If anybody's tried to work on something in a hurry that's as finicky and as difficult to get at, they'll know that it becomes all thumbs and no fingers in the rush, unfortunately. You can see also some of the rear suspension there, the allowable modifications to the cars, the additional sway bar there next to the shock absorber, and the modified K-Max springs that we can see there.
Can you hear us, Kerry, at the moment? Still noisy in the pits, I think, Howard.
Also just visible past the rear of Bob Gracie is that controversial but very, very clever idea of the fuel tank, which has been put under the original tank position rather than on top of, and thereby lowering the centre of gravity of all of that 28 or 29 gallons of fuel. All of the studs are in position, the nuts are on, the wheel nuts being done up now, and the brake.
Drama in the pits in the great race, the Hardy Ferodo 1000. Can you hear me, Phil? Can you hear Phil? Track is drying. Barry Seaton pressing on very hard in the leading car in the 3-litre category, still lifting wheels through the bends, now thundering down Conrod Straight. Peter Brock is back on the circuit, having been in the pits 6.5 minutes to replace the broken axle. Not bad time. Go into your garage next time you break an axle and say, I've got 10 minutes, could you please change it? Down the straight, Barry Seaton goes by the injured Dolomite that Dixon cranked up on the mountain. It's been put on the rescue truck. The track is drying out. Rain seems to have stopped, although it still could be around. And Barry Seaton going very well in the outright category. Let's now have an IBM printout on the leading 10 cars overall, because a few of the 3-litre cars, including this one, number 26, feature in the top 10. Peter Brock, by the way, is back on the circuit, having spent 6.5 minutes having the broken axle changed.
Also, Bobby Morris, race leader, has just entered the pits.
So we have a critical pit stop then with Morris in there as the results go over. You can see now the same lap as Bond and Harvey, so if this is their last pit stop, as we were told by John Fitzpatrick last time, who is now taking over, The amount of time they spend there is very, very important. Barry Seaton. Watch for his number 26. It's a nice move up into 7th place by Bob Forbes and Russell McRae. There's Seaton in 9th place. He was as high as 4th last year, much later in the race, and then lost a back wheel. Don Holland and Lynn Brown behind in the RX3, so quite a pursuit going on in that class. And this is Barry Seaton, using special compound bridgestones, I believe, John Davison, which are supposed to be much better with light rain conditions. You don't need to come in as early as with some of the more traditional compounds. Oh, there's a loss of a tyre by the look of it in the back on Bruce Hodson's car. He had a nice old spin there. Whether he's bounced, it's hard to tell, but he certainly lost the rubber on the back, you can see. And whether the tyre just shed or not, it's an old rally trick. If there's a rally section, you go on for 20 kilometres.
That's one of those very expensive German wheels that he's got, which bolt together for varying the size, and he's about to ruin about $300 worth of wheel on his way home.
It could hardly have happened in a worse place if he's going to try and do a whole lap. He's not. He's pulling him to the side for a bit of an examination. He may be able to go around the back of the pits, just on the pit road there, and then come out again. He certainly can't contemplate trying to drive around the track. Barry Seaton, coming down through Forest Elbow, has one of the Holden dealer team cars pretty close behind. It should engulf him on the way down the straight this time. Colin Bond running a very close second while the car stays in the pits. If he gets by, he's going to be in front. So this is the interesting point to watch as Bond now comes down the straight.
Can we go to Kerry Luckins and ask him if this is just a routine stop?
Looks like it. Yes, it certainly was a routine stop, but unfortunately they've had drama after drama. Firstly, on the right-hand front wheel, Bruce Richardson didn't have the air jack on the front high enough. He had to disconnect his air hammer, then connect it to the jack the car up, and then when he almost had the wheel on, the jack slipped, and the car had to be jacked up once again with a manual jack, and they lost, I would think, an extra minute at least. So that was bad luck, just the car rolling back, the jack not working. But these are the things, unfortunately, where we've said throughout the day that the races are not only won and lost in the circuit, but they're also won and lost in the pits. So it'll be most interesting now to just see this great dice between Colin Bond and the international Britisher John Fitzpatrick, keeping in mind, of course, that as we understand, Colin Bond still has to stop once more for fuel.
It's Charlie O'Brien and Wayne Negus who are in front, not Colin Bond. We have to pick out just where the gap is between them, but John Fitzpatrick is out there. Car 8 is the one just in front of him. There's Fitz going around now. He'll be very upset. He won't show it in the way he drives. He's too professional for that. But he'll be sorry about that minute that was lost.
It'll be interesting to see what times that he can do now, because he now knows that it's up to him, it's up to his driving skill to bring this car home in first place. All the money that's been spent on the whole of this event is now on his shoulders.
Remarkable the way Barry Seaton, just behind his cornering, he's lifting that inside front wheel higher and higher. Let's have Class C, or to be more accurate, the 3-litre cars. Now that's the extent of the lead that Seaton, who is just following behind Fitzpatrick in 7, has at the moment. He's 1 lap in front of the Mazda of Don Holland and Lynn Brown. Then Graham Moore and Dick Johnson in the Queensland entered Ford Capri from Brian Burt Ford, who's a great supporter of motor racing and one of the really great enthusiasts. Used to be down in Sydney. In fact, I think he's come second at least in the Hardy Frodo in the past with Bobby Skelton when he was based in Sydney, now up in Queensland and loving the life up there. The BMW in 8th place.
Don't forget John French when you're talking about Brian Burt.
There's John Fitzpatrick, who drove the last spell. Right, Class B up to 2 litres, 1.3 to 2 litre category. Let's look how the field lies there. Still the South Australian escort, Eric Ward. That's a good result. A lot of people thought they'd be fast but wouldn't last. Then the GTV Alpha of Phil McDonald and Jim Hunter, just 1 lap behind, so still a pretty close contest there. Peter Werrett and David Jones in the Pi Racing Alpha next, the left-hand drive car that Marie-Claude Beaumont and John Leffler drove to victory in this class last year. Lyndon Arnell and Peter Hopwood in the Escort RS, just in front of the Victorian pair, Frank Porter and the former outright race winner Tony Roberts in the Clemens Alfetta GT.
it really settles down to finding out the relative positions of Fitzpatrick and Bond. Remembering Bond is supposed to have one more pit stop, and from that we can try to calculate who may well be the winner of this race, even at this earlier stage.
The 1.3 litre class as the pit boards are out. That's one for Colin Bond, and that should tell the information. It is changing.
That's wrong. Should be plus 83. The pit crew have just messed that up.
They must have heard you. Oh, plus 13. They're getting really confused. 113.
Anybody's guess.
The Class A car is going through at the moment. Doug Whiteford in third place with Roger Bonham, the oldest contestant. In fact, must be getting very close to 60 years of age now, Doug, but enjoys his racing here.
Just over half a lap there in front.
When the numbers get very low, it almost inevitably means retirement. Total number of laps covered by the car being shown on the IBM printout, of course. Anxious time in the pits when the crew wait. There's the Bond board, now 113 seconds.
Only 27 laps left to go, according to that.
You'll notice now that the times are down to 2 minutes 35.5 from the 2 minutes 30s that they were running before. The P is P1, position 1, L, lap 27, 27 laps to go.
They give them the reverse order, so the driver hasn't got to go through the mental problem. Oh, a big burst of smoke on the corner there. No indication of what caused it. But drivers have got a lot on their mind, John Davison, and I would think that one great point about the pit signals is to make them as simple as possible and as explicit as possible.
Yes, well, very briefly, the plus sign that they saw of 113 is the Colin Bond and John Harvey are 113 seconds in front. It's no use giving 1 minute 25. You just do it in plain, simple numbers.
Well,
and if they see that it's plus 115 the next lap, they know they've increased their lead by 2 seconds.
So 113 seconds is what the Harry Firth pit gives as the lead, following the John Fitzpatrick pit stop. And that looks like a very nasty stop in the fence there. You can see the rather damaged front. The car is the ATV entry. Here, Alan Cant and George Morrell have been driving, both New South Wales drivers. That's Alan Cant. Just seeing what's the trouble. I don't know whether he's caused damage, in fact. I think it's just purely parked it with a Cook motor by the look of it. It looked a little bit funny at the front, but it may just be the black grille and the rather unusual shape we saw there of the grille. Yeah, that's all it is, I think. I don't know whether he's had trouble. He certainly parked it a long way off the road there.
Yes, he knew that was blown up a long time ago.
So another car to add to the list of retirement. One of the 3 litre cars which have been going very well in terms of reliability.
2 minutes 32.5. I've just got off Fitzpatrick, which is sizably quicker than the time of 35.5 they gave Bond. So in that lap alone, he would have caught up about 3 seconds.
A race that could well be won from the pits, not in the pits necessarily, but from the pits. Vital the sort of information that John Fitzpatrick gets, just as is vital the information the Holden dealer team give to Colin Bond. Now swinging round, out of pit straight. You can see Bruce Hodgson on the left there, changing the wheel himself, doing it the hard way. Nothing new for Hoddo. He doesn't mind a bit of a battle, and he likes a bit of hard preparation. But that's bad luck for the driver from Griffith. He's one of the cheeriest souls in motorsport. Agreed, Howard Marsden?
Absolutely. He's going to enjoy his bottle of wine from Doug O'Turley's tonight.
Phil McDonald in the foreground there as Colin Bond's car goes hustling up the mountain. In the pits, Kerry Luckin. What's happening there? Nothing greatly happening down there, right? The wicket goes from Phil McDonald to say to Colin Bond, pass on that side, please. Tucks in behind, has a brief look at a very fast V8. The Alpha going well, second in his class, behind the Eric Ward South Australian Escort. McDonald, one of the finds of the year, was very late into the 3 litre series, the Sun 7 Rothman series at Amaroo Park, and didn't get time to score enough points, but really started to dominate the 2 litre category there in what were much shorter races than this. You can see up the top of the mountain, the point where we lost Alan Cant, who parked with a well and truly cooked motor. Colin Bond has hustled by, now going from the skyline and down the hairy part of the downhill. Spectators thronging there, hanging from trees, watching him still hanging the wheels over the edge. Bond still clipping the edges just as vigorously as he did in the opening laps when things were so hectic, and he had Alan Moffat, Peter Brock close by, a real dice, and Bobby Morris trying to join in the throng. Now it's Morris's car in second place behind Colin Bond, but Bond has
excuse me,
for a pit stop.
Morris has come in. Fitzpatrick has come into the pits. He's obviously got some problem, I would say, with the left-hand front. I can see smoke coming off it. The pit crew aren't ready for it at all. Kerry Luckins possibly will be there first on the scene.
We might just get the camera there. We're right. We'll keep talking over.
Yes, I am here. The left-hand front tyre is flat. This is the one on the opposite side to which they had the problem with the jack just a few moments ago. Tyre is off. Bruce Richardson down. They're not relying on the air jacks this time. They've got the good old faithful hand jack to get the car into the air. Bruce Richardson, the team chief for the Rod Hodgson Holden team, really working furiously to get this unfortunately flattened tyre replaced.
Bond has just gone through into the lead for a lap's lead.
Fitzpatrick still with the engine running, and just as soon as this car hits the ground, he'll be away. The car is down and he's away.
So he has a lap to make up then, Kerry.
It's a very, very fast quick stop. I'm sorry, Evan, I missed that.
That's all right. I was saying he has just over a lap to make up because Colin Bond hasn't gone by and now has a lead of about a lap and something in the area of 10 or 15 seconds. We've got an accurate timing on it, but Fitzpatrick now has the man he has to beat in front of him, and Colin Bond, you can see him at the end of the straight, Colin Bond still has to make one more stop. John Goss's car with Jim Richards at the wheel, despite being so far back, having lost an hour and a half in the pits changing a clutch, is quite delighted to see someone of the category of John Fitzpatrick there. He'll hang on to him now. A couple of the faster ones who are still lurking back a little bit. Bob Forbes in the car 14, the Andronicus car, and Bobby Skelton in the Max Wright one, both enjoying each other's company. And up the top of the circuit, Colin Bond, who wants no one around him because he has the race to win. He's in front, but he has to make a stop, and those mechanics in the pit are really going to be greased up, ready for his arrival.
Actually, Howard, you've had a lot of experience in Europe. The standard of our pit crews over here seem to be in a state of, none of them really seem to be all that organised. Are they organised in your opinion, or are they much better in Europe?
Well, maybe that's a little bit harsh. Of course, the best people are the Americans, but then they get professional crews. You actually hire a professional crew of wheel changers, tyre changers, whatever they are in America. The people in Europe aren't that good. The Italians tend to get a bit excited, and the English can be a little bit too phlegmatic. I don't think the pit crews have been very good here this year, I must say. Particularly the Bobby Morris crew have been very slow. Whilst I'm talking, in fact, into the pits comes the number 8 car of Charlie O'Brien, Wayne Negus. I assume that this is just routine service. Let's see how quick they are as we're talking about this particular problem. We're obviously worried about the diff unit, I would say.
Charlie O'Brien getting in the rather substantial form of the Queensland driver, only 21, being strapped into the car. Very difficult job here at Bathurst to lap score. We've had our share of troubles in the past, and we've had them again today. The official lap scorers apparently were confusing car 5 and car 9 early on, of all numbers, to get Peter Brock and Alan Moffat confused. Luckily, though, the IBM team here, who have developed some pretty remarkable skills over the years, were able to pick the problem. One reason why early in we didn't bring you too many of the IBM printouts, because we knew the figures were wrong. But the IBM team have gone to the lap scores, they've sorted it out, they've put their brains to work just as hard as the computers, and we've now got the situation sorted out. But it was a little confusing in some of these early laps, and we're very indebted to the team we have here from IBM for straightening things out for us, because it's a very confusing situation. The lap scorers have got a most unenviable task. Visually, they have to note the numbers as the cars go by, and that's pretty hard when there's a group of cars, maybe 4 or 5 with a couple of them side by side. And I don't suppose it's too hard for someone to confuse a 5 with a 9, as happened.
That can happen. At the moment, talking of the lead, Bond's lead over Fitzpatrick is 1 lap and 16 seconds.
Which is approximately 2 minutes 46, roughly on the times they're averaging at the moment. So if Brock took any longer than 2 minutes 46 in his next pit change, into the lead goes Morris and Fitzpatrick, but it seems unlikely they'll take that long, doesn't it?
I would have thought you're right.
4th place, Charlie O'Brien, now at the wheel of the second of the Holden Dealer team cars. Not running with the special brakes, not having brake troubles by the look of it either. Peter Jansen, or it could be Kevin Bartlett in the car on the left behind. A disappointed man, I would think, would be the man who came from overseas, the Australian, to drive with Alan Moffat, Vern Schubert, and Kerry Luckins has him in the pits.
Vern Schuppen, the Australian international driver, your first run at Bathurst, disappointing that you're non-finishing.
Yes, obviously very disappointed because the car was going so well and we were just stroking along really, and I think there was a very silly thing that went wrong, and that just seems to be the thing that often happens in a race like this.
This, though, is part of motor racing, isn't it? No matter how good your preparation, it can very often is something very silly.
Yes, in fact, the preparation on this car has been really fantastic, and Alan Moffat said last week, if anything lets us down, it'll be something stupid, and really that's what's happened.
Vern, have you enjoyed your run here at Bathurst?
Oh, it's a fantastic circuit. It's a mini Nürburgring, and it's very challenging. I just sincerely hope that I get the opportunity to come back and have another go.
Vern, you haven't been particularly well known as a touring car driver. Do you think this might whet your appetite for some touring car racing in Europe?
This is really my first touring car race. I drove a turbocharged Porsche about 2 or 3 months ago in Austria. But, it's quite a different machine to this, so this was my first car at this type of racing.
Do you think you prefer still the open-wheeler racing?
Oh, I wouldn't say that. I enjoy driving any sort of racing car. If it's a good car, then they're all challenging and they're all fun to drive.
Good, you're just a very competitive driver, and we hope to see you back here in Australia, and particularly here at Mount Panorama in the very near future.
Before you go, Vern, can you hear me over here? Evan Green at the microphone. Do you hear me, Vern?
I do, Evan.
Great. What precisely went wrong? We heard about the crankshaft pulley braking, but just tell us what went wrong on the track first and what happened to the car and what have you tried to do to repair it?
Well, as you probably know, Alan Moffat did his stint of 41 laps, and I came in on the 39th lap, 1 lap early because the bonnet strap had come loose, which was nothing major. Alan Moffat then took over, and he'd done 6 laps when the bottom pulley, the fan belt pulley, broke, and consequently the water pump was then not working. In turn, the engine overheated, and it damaged the engine sufficiently to put us out of the race.
Fine. Thanks very much, Vern, and let's join in commiserations with you. John Davison, you want to speak with Vern?
Yes, can you hear me, Vern? Now, there have been some comments made that the Bathurst Shire Council want to run a Formula 5000 race here. Is in fact the circuit safe enough in your opinion?
It's a little bit dangerous condition. It's a very, very fine circuit, but with a single seater where you have very minimum amount of protection, the circuit in its present condition would be a little bit dangerous because it has barbed wire fencing lining the straight for one thing, and if a Formula 5000 car went off on the straight, they would reach speeds of 185 miles an hour, and you can imagine what would happen if a driver went into a barbed wire fence at that sort of speed. So the straight itself would need to be lined with a straight area.
Vern Schuppen, more from the stars of the Hardy Ferodo in a moment.
Bloody motor cars.
Gee whiz.
Oh, it looks like Fitzpatrick's coming in the pits again. We might just get him next time.
Nobody. Nobody saw. I said gee whiz. Oh, sorry. Can we go back when we come on to the lead cars, please, because Fitzpatrick is really getting to Bond. He's picking up 5 seconds a lap. Oh, that's good. That's excellent.
Yeah, maybe we could even have a look at the lap scoring thing for a moment. Can we wander across while we're on commercial and see how many laps they've covered? That's the shot. Thank you. 130. My golly, not far to go.
So we've got
And 7 is 129.
33.
Car 3, we mustn't forget. We haven't looked at them. They're on the same number of laps as car 8. That's Bob Skelton. We'll come back to Fitz, shall we?
Yes, because he is he's 5 seconds a lap. Just incredible. And it's because Colin's running quickly, by the way. I mean, Colin's running slowly.
Yes. He's picking up 5 seconds a lap.
Oh, yes.
Is he? Thank you. Back to the Hardy Frodo 1000 with something like 32, 33 laps still to go. Colin Bond in front, but the gap is being diminished all the time, Howard Marston.
About 3 laps ago, I called it at 1 lap and 16 seconds. I think by the time we next catch them up, we'll in fact find that Fitzpatrick is very close to the back of Colin Bond to unlap himself. And I think they're down at the bottom of the main straight, and here we come, and there we can see it. The gap is now second to a second and a half. Fitzpatrick is flying. He's taking about 5 seconds a lap off Bond, and it's not just because he's going so quickly. Bond is in fact going reasonably slowly now. Either there's something wrong with the car or he's getting wrong signals from his pit.
He has to make a pit stop. The scheduled stops seem to take about 1:30 in the pits, but they're slowing down time and accelerating time, and he hasn't got much time to play with.
That's right. With 30 laps to go at 5 seconds a lap, he's got more than enough time to lose this race.
Right. He has about a minute's leeway if his pit stop is exactly on schedule. Maybe less, maybe 30 seconds to play with it. You see John Fitzpatrick now, and Fitzpatrick right behind him as they go barreling up the mountain. No doubt in Colin Bond's mind where the threat's coming from. Fitzpatrick's starting to pull out already. Well, Fitzpatrick is trying.
Hang on, Fitz.
Oh, he's used to handling 500 horsepower or more, so he won't be greatly troubled by the power, but he was saying something about the way these cars drive. He's a most interesting man to talk to, so let's have a chat with John Fitzpatrick, pursuing in car 7. Third visit to Australia. Your first was way back in 1964 at Sandown.
That's right. I came over with BMC to drive the Mini Coopers with Paddy and Timo. That was a fantastic trip. Really wonderful. We went to Adelaide, Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney. It was a wonderful trip.
What have you done since then? You were very much at the start of your racing career. How long have you been driving?
In fact, this year is my 15th year. I'd only been driving for 4 years when I came to Australia first. And I've always concentrated on saloon and sports cars. I never have been involved with single-seaters at all.
How did you get involved in motor racing in the first place?
Well, like most people, I had my own car and did a few local events for 12 months and then was lucky enough to do well, and then somebody said, well, come and drive my car, and then someone else said, come and drive mine. And my big break, of course, was when BMC were looking for someone to drive their Mini Coopers with Paddy. And I happened to win a race when John Cooper was there watching. So that, of course, was really the start for me.
What have you done since then?
What have I done since? Some people say not very much. Now, I drove BMC for 2 or 3 years, then I moved over to Ford with Anglias, Escorts, Ford Cortinas, and then I got over to Germany. I drove for Ford Germany for a year, and then that got me into Porsches for 3 years, BMW, all factory cars, and I've been driving BMW this year.
What's the most exciting car you've driven?
Well, they seem to get quicker every year. Obviously, the more power you've got, the more exciting it is, and this year, I suppose, my BMW with more or less 500 horsepower was quite a good car, very fast.
What sort of speed?
Well, top speed at Le Mans we were doing 195.
Miles an hour?
Miles an hour, yes. I don't know what that is in kilometres. We haven't progressed to that yet.
We've switched to kilometres, but not many people understand. 195 miles an hour is a very fast speed. What does that sort of travelling do to your reactions?
Well, I don't think it's the top speed, which you notice, Evan. Everything's relative. You've got your helmet on. You can't hear much because of the earplugs. You don't. If you said to me, what speed are you doing, I really couldn't say. I think it's the speed in and out of the corners with the BMW that you notice. The tremendously wide tyres, tremendous grip. And when you give it full power out of that corner, you really do feel a push in the back. Similar to Formula 5000, I suppose. A similar sort of power to weight.
How does the Bathurst race compare to some of the overseas classics?
Well, I think it compares very well. I think the circuit here is very, very good. You've got every sort of corner on this circuit, from almost hairpins to fast corners, long straights. It compares, the circuit itself compares well, and of course the entry is fabulous. I don't think in Europe you get a race with so many good cars competing. In Europe you might have 12 or 15 good cars and the rest sort of make up the field. But here they all seem to be good cars.
What worries you most about Bathurst?
I suppose that drop at the top without the guardrail, really, where Tim went off last year. But we used to have the same thing in Europe 3 or 4 years ago and didn't think about it. And it's only now that the Grand Prix drivers have asked for these guardrails that we think about it. So I won't notice it during the race, I'm sure.
You don't feel fear at all at any stage in the race, or great nervousness?
No, I certainly don't feel fear. Certainly before the start of the race, if I'm starting, that last minute, it's like waiting to go for an interview to a new job. You feel butterflies in the stomach, but certainly that's about all. And the minute the flag drops, of course, you just get on with it and forget about it.
How old are you, John?
I'm 33.
And how much longer do you expect you'll keep on racing?
Well, as long as somebody will have me in the team, quite honestly. I enjoy it so much that as long as I can get myself a competitive drive, I shall carry on.
John Fitzpatrick carrying on very effectively in car 7, has passed Colin Bond. Colin probably not too unhappy to see him in front. At least he can watch him now and not be harried quite so much. But Colin, of course, must be wondering what's going to happen when he makes his own pit stop, knowing that that is going to be the vital part of this race.
You can see now with the way the car is set up. I was talking about handling before. The oversteer is looking very spectacular. It's not as dangerous as it looks.
We'll look at that again when we return to the Hardy Ferrari 1000 in just a moment.
Come on, H. Talk to Harry. Get Kerry in to talk to Harry.
Yep. Can we run up some of the classings just to run them? I'm worried about the the lack of attention to some of these classes. If we can just maybe run through points. The more often your camera could sway towards that lap counter too, Phil, from now on, the handier it's going to be. And we just keep our own middle lap score with it and start counting them off. Thank you. 133.
Yes.
Yes, 163.
See, Bruce Hodson's back and running again. No, that's okay. That's when his next pit stop is.
Yes, so 19 laps for a pit stop.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, there are 19 laps to go for a pit stop. Remember that. Thank you. I know. I know. I wouldn't mind following one of the Class A cars, like the pit signals waiting there. The second Holden dealer team car, Charlie O'Brien out at the moment. You can see his time, 39.2 seconds. He is in third place, and he has 32 laps to go. All running down there. It's all nice and clear and chronological for the drivers who have to know what it all means. They get to recognise the shape of the board or their colours. You can see the mechanics looking a bit anxious. They're the ones who are going to have to do the job when Colin Bond comes in. He's due in about 19 laps time. It'll be a pretty quick stop. He's got another 29 laps to go. See Bond's board behind from last time at 31.8, 39.2. Much slower time by Charlie O'Brien. But probably quick enough. There's no point trying to gain a place that he can't gain and risk the car. 13, the West Australians back in the event, just in front of the Queenslander Charlie O'Brien. 13, Karen, some strife earlier, Tim Slaker and Brian Rhodes, who have pressed on, have repaired the problem that afflicted them a little early in the race, and now they're back in it. Two of the three West Australian drivers, Wayne Negus, who is sharing the car right behind them, making up the other one from the West.
It's interesting doing a few calculations on the pit stop that they're going to have to do on the Bond car. They are going to have to put in a minimum of 2 cans of fuel. Now that's going to take them 25 seconds. So from complete slowing down, stopping, switching off the car, 2 cans of fuel, putting it all back into again, they're going to lose about a minute and 10 to 15 seconds in a total lap time. So Fitzpatrick has got to get himself within that figure of about 1 minute 10 to win this race.
Here are the IBM results as of lap 134. That's with 29 to go. The Bond Harvey car in front, still to make one pit stop though. Fitzpatrick driving the second car, having passed Colin Bond on the road in second place. Brian Negus, 3 laps back, so no way they can catch their car. Fourth place, making up a lot of time now is Bob Skelton and Alan Hamilton in 129. They had strife early, they were lapped very early on. And another good performance by Jansen and Bartlett. The Brock brothers have dropped back due to that axle problem, which set them back after having run out of fuel earlier through a fuel pickup problem. And way up high there you saw the Barry Seaton car, the leading non-V8 performer in the V6 Capri. Ali O'Brien there with Peter Brock. Peter wanting to get by, waving around, trying to find a path through. It's a bit hard with so many cars, and Peter covering a lot of extra ground there in his anxiety to get on with it. Now he'll get by. Charlie O'Brien now will give the Holden Dealer team car a bit of a squirt, as does Tim Swaco in the West Australian car. Let's look at the 3-litre class results as we watch these big V8s spearing on down Conrod Straight. A little game of try and break the toe as they go. They're all about the same sort of speed in terms of ultimate maximum. But Brock now in second spot in this little group. He'll try and outbrake the West Australian. Really gets his skirts up and goes very quickly there for the final little hump. The braking markers on the right indicating how far to go in meter increments. Braking down, now changing down. Takes a handful of the wheel. No trouble this time as he had early on when he almost lost the car. Charlie O'Brien right up behind Slako's tail. The Pie car, Peter Werrett, left-hand drive Alpha. Seeing a lot of fast cars go whipping by there, but going very well. The same car that Marie-Claude Beaumont and John Leffler drove to success in the class of the Hardy Photo last time. Let's look now at the 2-litre category, in which that black and white Alpha is doing very well. In third place, 40B, you can see it there, Peter Werrett and David Jones. Only 1 lap behind the leader, Eric Board, so that is still very much an open contest. Lyndon Arnold and Peter Hopwood, the sports car driver, in the second of the Escort RS 2000 models. Then the Victorians in the Alpha, Jim Porter and Tony Roberts. And the Auto Delta, the works division of Alfa Romeo competition department, of John Leffler and Richard Carter in next spot, the 5th place of the 2-litre class. Peter Brock. In the little car class, we've got the almost traditional winner, Bill Evans, in his little Datsun 1200. He's won this 3 times in the last 6 years. He's still leading the class, as we'll see when the IBM computer punches up the class results. He has a 1-lap lead over the 2 Honda Civics. The second one, Roger Bonham and Doug Whiteford. I mentioned before, Doug Whiteford, the oldest driver on the track. You could probably remember when Jack Brabham was a little fella. Peter Brock going quickly, and so is Colin Bond. Not as fast as he was early. He's lapping around 2:34. Is fast enough, would you think, Howard Martin?
Not really. I think he's now really has to keep going, and he'll get whatever position comes to him. The race is definitely between only those first 2 cars of Morris and Bond.
35, the car just being passed there, one of the surviving triumphs. one that a little bit lucky to survive, the John DeLacker car with Terry Wade as co-driver, was the one that figured in that unpleasant incident on the starting line, unpleasant for all the sentimental followers of motorsport, and it was the car that ran Jack Brabham, quite accidentally, no fault of DeLacker, of course, but didn't pay to any hopes that Brabham and Moss would have, and they now dropped a valve and they are out of the race, but still in the race, still churning around in a time that would have won the race outright many years ago, had they had it here in the days of cars like the Alfa Romeo that John Davis was talking about. Would have been a contender even in those days, which is an extraordinary thought. Bill Evans pulls over to the left. The circuit, of course, has been improved enormously. In fact, Bathurst in his early days was a dirt circuit. Back in 1938 when it started, it wasn't sealed. That'd be quite a prospect. Imagine doing the telecast in a cloud of dust. Even more confusing than today. Bill Evans.
Talking with
very pleasant sort of driver, has done rallycross and rallying and racing, and that really enjoys his motorsport.
In this class, he's so far out in front of the other people. He says his biggest problem is actually keeping his concentration up. He says quite often he sort of half nods off and finds himself in the middle of the corner with piranhas all around his ears. He says it's really very difficult.
Honda Civic's doing well. There were 3 of them in the race. 3 of them still on the list, although one of them, the Brian Riley car 63, has stopped with 77 laps to its credit, whereas the leader now is up to 112, and the 2 continuing Civics have each covered 110 laps. So a 2-lap margin then to Bill Evans, leading in the up to 1.3 litre category. Bear in mind too, the fast fellas out there, some of those particularly who maybe can't win the race, are still looking at that vain trophy, with his $1,000 prize for the person who makes the fastest lap during the race. And that's an award well worth winning, and a great inducement to someone who has lost the chance of winning the race. They could do with a bit of money to pay for the enormous bills that usually go with lack of success.
Actually, just to give the viewers a little bit of an idea, Howard Marsden and I were discussing relative budgets and what it costs to afford to do different facets of motorsport, Formula 1, Formula 5000 and this type of race. And Howard, you were explaining to me you thought it probably cost Moffat in the vicinity of $40,000 to gear up and prepare for this race alone.
Yes, at least that would be quite a minimum sum for him to do it. Alan does everything very professionally, spends a lot of money. Each engine would cost him as much as $7,000 or $8,000 on top of the purchase of the parts to do the effort. He'll be here with 3 engines, and therefore it is a great shame to see him going out with something that's really not a very large item.
Yes.
Among the retirements we've had so far, the only all-woman crew, unfortunately, but Christine Gibson and Maria Claude Beaumont retired at about mid-distance in their Brian Foley entered Alfetta GT. Never had a very happy race. They stopped and changed the flames that early and eventually retired from the event. Bill Evans sawing away quite vigorously there, sitting down a little lightweight 1200. Doesn't run the 120 wide because it's heavier than the older car, so still runs the older model. Chasing the Brian Potts driven 3-litre Capri, which he's sharing with Russell Scaife. And in the pits, John Goss, who's had a pretty wretched, miserable sort of race with Jim Richards sharing the driving. They did a clutch, something that happened to them in practice yesterday, and they changed the motor and missed most of the mid-practice sessions. Still qualified well and made their way to the 3rd row of the grid, but have never really featured strongly in the race, except around mid-distance when others started to pit and have troubles, and they sort of grew up a little bit in the list until they were lying around 5th, and then the clutch went. Jim Richards in the car at the moment, having earnest conversations with the mechanic. Oh, up the top there with, once again, 41. We've seen him before, Ron Gillard. We saw him parked on the grass at one stage. You may remember the car seemed to be bogged. He's agitated because...
Bond's in the pits. He's come in early.
In the pits, Colin Bond has come in for 2 churns of fuel only, unless anything untowards to be reported by Colin. Having anxious words now with one of the team boys from the Marlborough Holden dealer team. 2 churns of fuel to go in. Looks like everything else is in order. The front tyres are just being checked. 2nd churn just going in now. It looks like they might even throw a 3rd one in for good measure. Just being ready now to get it in. Harry Firth, the Marlborough Holden team chief, on the pit side there, just timing this stop. Very important, of course, for him to know exactly where his car is. Well in the lead, of course, from the Ron Hodgson car, but anything can happen as we see the Clemens Alpha coming in past us with yet another flat tyre. Boot down now. Collins got the go signal. Fired it up, and he's away. And a very, very quick pit stop for just on 3 churns of fuel. And we'll just get Harry Firth now to have a word and just get his impressions and ideas how this remainder of this race is going to be run.
On in the pits for a total of 53 seconds. Add to that the slowing down and accelerating time, and he's still got this race won if he can just last it. But John Fitzpatrick got a big job now. He'll get a pit signal pretty quickly when he comes around, telling him what he has to do to make up. Back to Kerry Luckins and Harry Firth.
Harry Firth with just a few laps and half an hour or so remaining, you must be feeling fairly confident.
It's never over until the bloody flag's dropped.
You've got cars in first and we think third position. Is that how you see it?
The other one, yes.
Yeah. It must be your year this year after a few disappointing years.
Oh, yeah. I think we reckon it was our turn this year, Nelly.
The brake problem that Bondi seemed to have,
There's no brake problem. We were going to change the pads. That's why we made them that way.
It was part of your pit stop plan.
Yeah.
And as the race
they were just a bit hard to change. That's all. They stuck a bit.
Is the race run how you would have expected it to be run?
Yes, we thought the Fords would drop out about when they did. We thought a few others would have dramas, which they did.
Well, Colin certainly went very well. He ran very fast from the drop of the flag. Let's hope he can get it the rest of the way to the checkered flag.
Well, we elected to buzz off early, then let them go and just follow them, and then just see what happened.
Very good. Well, we hope to see you on the winners roster in half an hour or so.
That would be nice.
Thanks, Harry.
Colin Bond trying to make sure it is nice for Harry Firth up the top of the mountain. What sort of estimate of the gap between Bond and Fitzpatrick now, Howard Marsden?
Exactly 62 seconds now, and we've got how many laps to go? It would be about
maybe 25 in that area,
approximately. So Colin's going to have to drive very hard. We're going to see how much is left in both the drivers and also both these cars more particularly. Remember what I was telling you early on about the brakes on the Fitzpatrick car, that they were the smaller ones to keep this heat up at a particular temperature. They haven't had troubles yet. Fitz is going to have to push this car very hard over these last 20-odd laps. I hope for Bobby's sake that he was right.
Colin Bond coping with the most extraordinary traffic jam there, going down, being locked in behind a Capri, who can't do much about it to get out of the way because there are slower cars in front of him. Under braking when the Alpha's closing right up behind, that's the Clemens car. Probably Tony Roberts, who won with Colin Bond in 1969. Up goes the sign. 24 to go.
Peter Jansen's in the pits again.
Harry Seaton just in front of Colin Bond. Seaton leading the 3-litre class, running about 8th place in our track. One pulls out to pass on the left-hand side. Slower cars behind, and mainly 2-litre cars, all pull to the left to give room for Peter Brock, who's hovering into view, and leave that clear right-hand straight for the cars up the 1 kilometre long mountain straight.
Peter Jansen missed his pit by about 100 yards. He's obviously out of brakes. He's had to reverse all that distance, which is quite against the regulations.
They're doing extraordinarily well, John Davison, to be so high, considering all the strife they've had. They've been into the pits. This will be about their 8th occasion.
Well, as Howard Marsden has said, and he said it quite often, and it applies to any form of sport today, athletics, rowing, lawn tennis, Grand Prix racing, the teams that are well equipped, the teams that have full sponsorship, like the Holden Dealer team and Moffat's establishment, are the teams to beat. And these teams are finding it very difficult, such as Jansen at the moment, to prepare their cars so that they don't have the dramas that some of the other teams do have. And unfortunately, they have run into a number of niggling problems. And considering the fact that they have run into these problems, they are doing very well under the circumstances. But this pit stop probably won't lose them much of a position, really, but it won't certainly help them.
Another car we'll be following soon is car 14, the Bob Forbes car that was second 2 years ago. Didn't do so well last year, finished 30 laps back, having had trouble. It has been a very consistent go and is up there in about the top 7 at the moment.
Actually, it looks to me like they've broken an axle.
Yes, they've got an axle type of problem there. On the last lap going round, the gap between Bond and Fitzpatrick had come down already to 57 seconds. So again, Fitzpatrick is making the time.
Bobby Forbes charging up the hill there. A very pleasant, amiable, non-racing type personality. But then again, there aren't too many racing drivers who look like racing drivers. I think one of the best looking cars, the trouble with a lot of the vehicles we see, they're so sign-written you can't recognise the shape. But that one at least you can tell what it is. The only confusion could be with the coffee tin. I don't think he'll make that sort of mistake. Almost won the race 2 years ago when rainfall was within 9 seconds of us. They decided that the better to back off and get second. Not in a chance of making second at the moment because there's a great race going on for first and second, and we'll be watching more when we return to the great race, the Hardy Ferodo 1000. Yes. Right, yeah, I was trying to lead up to that. Okay. All right. We could find out where he's coming. Car 14, outright. IBM, can we find that, please? We've got no communication with the computer. Seventh outright.
.140, 23 laps to go. Sorry, yes. Can you hear me now? Yes. The gap's now down to 53 seconds.
Whether he can catch, eh?
He can catch, definitely. Wait, he's going. Sorry? 53. 53. That's right, and there are 23 laps to go. So there's enough time to do it.
And I'd say Fitzpatrick's definitely the person that can do it.
It's the car that can do it. It's a car race, you know, reliability and the brakes and the whole thing.
You built up, right?
For consistency in this race, we'd have to go to Bobby Forbes, the man who's now running 7th in car 14, because in all the races since 1972 he has covered 576 laps, and that's more than anyone else. The next best is Peter Brock, who had 574, so he's close, only 2 laps down. Then Don Holland, 550. Colin Bond has covered 474. Alan Moffat has had his ups and downs, 465. Murray Carter, 411. And John Goss, 311. So what sort of fella is Bob Forbes? Well, let him tell us.
You built up an impressive record for consistency at Bathurst. You've covered a lot of laps too, Bob.
Yes, in fact, we've covered more laps at Bathurst in the last 5 years than any of our main competitors, thinking of Moffat, Bond, Brock and Goss. I put this down mainly to vehicle preparation and knowing the car and stroking it along during the day rather than getting out and going hell for leather. We almost won the event in 1974 using these exact tactics. And this year, of course, we're hoping for something similar and to keep our record of completing more laps than anybody.
Well, 74 was the year of the very close finish in which John Goss, or rather Kevin Bartlett, driving with John Goss in the Falcon, just got to the front ahead of you in the heavy rain.
That's quite true, yes.
What was the margin?
The margin actually varied. The finishing margin was just under a minute, but we had to come in for fuel with 12 laps to go. Kevin passed me, and I actually got within 8 seconds of Kevin, but Kevin's a marvellous driver in the wet. I could see there was no possibility of passing him in the treacherous conditions, so I just, let the car slow a little bit and just finish second.
Bobby Morris got the wrong man there. Bobby Morris is a man who's having quite a challenge at the moment. Bob Forbes, of course, in the Andronicus Coffee Sutton's Rally's car, number 14. Nice looking car. Not going to win it this year, but certainly going to add to his reputation for reliability. And among those he's challenging, I think he'll still stay in front. Only Brock, who's only 2 laps behind him in the total, may just get a little bit ahead. Bobby Forbes. Quite a battle going on there at the head of the field, Howard Marsden, where the real dice is between Colin Bond, who has made his pit stop and has now had no more scheduled stops, and John Fitzpatrick driving the Bob Morris car for Ron Hodgson. And Fitzpatrick is catching Bond at the rate of about 3 seconds a lap. Now, can he get him before the finish of the race?
If he can continue at 3 seconds a lap, yes, he can. At 3 seconds a lap, the gap is now down to about 51 seconds, and there are about 21 laps left to go to the race. So he can make it under those conditions. On the last run, though, he only made up about 1.5 seconds. So Bond in the lead with Morris chasing. There you can see the situation. The boys are getting a little bit anxious. Colin knows what that means, and it's a matter of how much is left, not so much in the drivers as in the cars.
Here's Peter Brock, in fact, who suffered from a petrol problem and caused him to stop on the circuit and lose many laps, and then a broken axle, back in again, running in a place but not going to win the race. Colin Bond right behind him. Can't afford to be blocked, not that Peter Brock is slow, but he has to get by. And John Fitzpatrick in car 7 going down that long serpentine straight. Conrad, here he comes now. Hodgson had an up and down day. He lost his Dolomite, which was expected to do so well in the 2-litre class, when Ron Dixon had a nasty shunt at the top of the hill, hit the bank, went across the other side, got out of the car, but was very woozy and was led away in a vehicle, feeling a bit sore around the leg by the look of the way he was holding his thigh and hip. Still, outright win will be a great consolation for Ron Hodgson. There's John Fitzpatrick going close to the fence. He's catching now the John Leffler driven Alfa Romeo, entered by the factory Auto Delta Australia, which is the competition division of Alfa Romeo. The car prepared in Milan, Italy. Beautiful looking machine. And not doing quite as well in the class as they had hoped. The Alfa number 59 was one that was expected maybe to win it, because it's a fuel-injected GDAM car with about 190 horsepower on tap, but just hadn't quite gone the way they'd hoped, although running very consistently. And you can see for yourself just how hard John Fitzpatrick is trying. Watch as he comes around through BP cutting, particularly on the way out. Now they watch, we switch angles.
He is now down to 48 seconds behind. Again, that oversteer showing in the car, trying extremely hard. Both pit managers now will be giving very anxious notices to their drivers to do their own thing.
Actually, Evan, I'm sorry, Howard, I really have to challenge you. I think this has turned into a basic driving race. I really do. I think the drivers have got no choice now but to go hell for leather. The machinery breaks, well, they did their best. But I think it has turned into a driver's race now.
Now, those sort of instructions that will be fed from the pits, though, because the race will be very largely controlled, but certainly as far as Colin Bond is concerned.
I agree with it being a driver's race, but how much of it can the cars take? Remember, these cars are now coming up for 1,000 kilometres of racing, and how hard can you push?
We have the marvellous situation as far as the race is concerned, where one car, the leader, Colin Bond, driving for the Mulholland and little thing, up goes Son. He's lost 1 second that lap. He can afford to lose a second lap, but not much more. Under very strict team discipline, the other car, John Fitzpatrick, they don't want second place, they want first or nothing. And Bob Morris in there is giving him the go, go, go signal. He'll be coming down there in about another 20-odd seconds. You can see him now over the top, down to the corner in that time.
Actually, it's moments like these when you are a racing driver that you need to see some sort of sizable chunk come off the gap that you've got to the other driver, to try as hard as you can and see half a second or a second come off when you know that the time you've got to do it in sometimes tends to knock a bit out of you. And in fact, some team managers tend to cheat and give their drivers an exaggerated margin they're catching on just to go, to give them that much ego to go on a bit further and try a bit harder.
No, the figures are being accurately given. And the time's now down to 45 seconds. The pit signals that are put out are, of course, a lap behind all the time. The gap is another 3 seconds off, so it's a regular catching process. Now, is it the question that Bond has any control of this? Has he got a little bit left? Is he preserving the car and not worrying that it's going to get within about a 10 or 30 second gap? This is something we don't know.
Great excitement in the closing stages of this Hardy Frodo 1000, being watched by a crowd of 36,499. The great race, the Hardy Frodo 1000. maybe we can talk to him from here.
We think the Holden dealer team car's coming in with a flat. Can you pick it up on the screen?
No, it's not got a flat, Kerry.
Not car 1, unless it's 8. Maybe 3.5 hours. Still the chase goes on. Colin Bond in front with the margin in hand. 19 laps to go.
Margin is now down to 41 seconds, Evan.
At this rate, then, John Fitzpatrick can catch Colin Bond. He's getting pretty accurate signals. He's going pretty quickly now, too. You can see he's really hurrying the car through, so if Fitzpatrick is catching him, it doesn't seem to suggest that Colin Bond is holding back. He's going pretty quickly, or as fast as he can, or the car can. The car looks all right. Just look at those tyres as he goes through. He's fairly sound.
Using the edges as well as he was early today.
Yes, that's right. He's not using all the road, which tends to give me the impression that he's become a little bit tired, and that tends to affect the flow you have of the car.
I think he has a problem with the car and he's not prepared to extend it too much.
That's right.
Down the straight where, in practice yesterday, they were hauling about 160 to 165 miles an hour, the fastest cars. Around 260 kilometres per hour. Bond in the braking area now. About 18 laps to go. Lifts the wheel slightly. Doesn't go out quite as wide as we saw before. He joined the race late. Let's recapitulate that Jack Brabham and Sterling Moss started disastrously when Brabham on the line had gearbox troubles, got 2 gears at once due to a gearbox malfunction, couldn't leave, and was rammed by a car behind, which put him in the pits for several hours. Took the car out. Sterling Moss took over. Drove very effectively, did the Sterling Moss, until finally a valve dropped. That was the end of the great comeback. But still some stimulating sights. Colin Bond going up the straight. John Fitzpatrick is coming down. That's the gap between them. You can almost look across and see each other. Fitzpatrick trying very hard, taking slightly wider lines, more fluent and faster lines.
37.5 seconds.
Well, this is good stuff. Fitzpatrick trying very hard. You can see there the difference, going hard, getting the signal from the Honda Civic driver in front. If it stays behind till the last minute, getting a little bit of effective tow. The Honda decides he'll try the same, but that'll last about half a second. There's the big V8 with over 360 horsepower churning, pulls away from the Honda with about 300 less.
Here goes the last of the surviving Falcons. Again, will have his steady run, and he'll end up in position 7 or 8, I believe it is, which is a good steady run for a man who really does it all himself.
Fitzpatrick trying very hard. Again, watch the way he goes through the cutting, where he really hangs the tail. Oh, no tail hanging that time, and probably just as quick for not doing it.
Settling down.
Certainly a fast line out there, almost cut the grass. Up the mountain to the flats along the top towards Skyline.
Actually, it's quite noticeable when Colin Bond comes past our commentary point here, Howard and Evan, that he is not revving the car nearly as hard as Fitzpatrick. So really the pressure is on Fitzpatrick, because Colin Bond probably believes in himself, believes in the tuition he's getting, and believes in his equipment, and says, well, I'm going to keep this car together, because if I overcook it, I have a lose, I biff something, I get in the road of a slower car, you know, it's all lost.
Whereas Fitzpatrick has got to go for broke.
That's right.
John Davison, which position would you rather be in? The man in front with the lead, or the man behind who knows where the man in front is and he has to catch it?
Well, if both the cars have got reliability, I'd prefer to be where Colin Bond is. But, you know, the thing that Colin Bond has got, and it's a big advantage he's got, is that he can't actually see Fitzpatrick. If he could see Fitzpatrick in his mirrors, by God, it'd be a lot of strain on him then, but he can't actually physically see him. And that is part of the big strain is off him. He only has to concentrate on his own consistency, therefore he only has to concentrate on himself. Once you have to start looking in the mirrors, it's the easiest way to lose your concentration.
Of course, that's when the real battle will come, is when they can see one another, if that's going to happen. Exactly. Colin Bond may just have a few seconds left up his sleeve for that particular time.
Fitzpatrick comes through to another lap, glances anxiously across the pits. How am I going? You're going well, only 37 seconds behind. Doing some quick mental calculation.
The time is actually now down to 32 seconds between the two cars.
that difference on the last lap. They, of course, are hanging out the sign of the time they took the last lap, so the information that Fitz always gets is 1 lap behind, 32 seconds.
Actually, if the two cars, if Colin Bond can then start actually seeing Fitzpatrick in his mirrors, Fitzpatrick's got that golden advantage like a long-distance runner who's catching up on someone with 2 laps to go and say 1,500 metres, or catching up to a person with 20 metres to go into 400 metres. It just gives you that extra adrenaline. It gives you that extra push, and you always seem to be able to bring out magic laps in motorsport. And if he can do that, and once a bloke gets a run on him like he's got at the moment, it's like a league football team getting a run on in the last 5 minutes. It's very hard to stop.
I think Bond on the top of the mountain going down just as Fitzpatrick joins the top. If you watch the back there, see smoke, signs of it. We have, yes, indeed. Now, maybe one of the reasons why the revs are down a little bit. He has a lead of 32 seconds. He has about 16 and a half laps to go. And at the rate that Fitzpatrick is catching him, he can certainly do it. And in fact, if they maintain the same pace, Fitzpatrick will catch him about 3 or 4 laps to go. Now, just how much life is left in the car? Certainly signs of blue smoke down the mountain now, so they're both on the descent at the same time. That's the first time it's happened. Bond is going down the straight. Fitzpatrick, for the first time, might just catch sight of it. He's got super eyes when he gets around Forest Elbow, the last bend here. The black and white distinctive tail of the Holden Dealer Team car will be just going over the last crest, coming down now through the right hanger.
The critical time will come at 20 seconds gap. At 20 seconds gap, Bond's either got something left or he's going to lose this race.
Both on the straight together. Fitzpatrick blazing down the far hump and braking here. Now let's wait and see what the difference is. We'll just wait. Fitzpatrick has not yet appeared inside. There's the pit signal for Bond. 16 to go they gave him. 10 seconds. Waiting for car 7 to crest the last hump. There's a car flying down now. Here comes the yellow car. Not the...
It's about 28 seconds.
Yes, you'll see it come through. Fitzpatrick now going through. But you're fairly close. 27.67.
I didn't need a watch to do that either.
Well, he's certainly making up more than he has to, and he's going to keep trying there and put that pressure on Colin Bond.
I would say within 2 laps, Fitzpatrick will be coming through the corner he's just gone through now, and Bond will be disappearing over the hump on the top end of your screen. Once he sees Bond, it's on.
Fitzpatrick, a former European GT champion, vastly experienced, raced at Le Mans. This is not a long race for him. He's driven twice this far, day and night. He's obviously getting used to the Tirana, and I think enjoying it. He certainly likes the circuit. He's used to driving 700 horsepower machines and 500 horsepower BMWs. He won't find the 360 horsepower of the Tirana any great problem.
We should watch Bond coming down the side of the mountain and see if we can pick up that smoke again.
Up through the cutting. Once more, John Fitzpatrick. Driving with Bobby Morris. Morris just 27, trying to make it 4 drivers who won this race at the age of 27. Colin Bond did. Freddie Gibson did.
Smoke. And that's from the engine as well.
Yes. It's certainly getting worse. Up the top of the mountain. Fitzpatrick. Just past the daily escort while Bond is still in the bends. So they're both on the descent, much closer together this time. And it'll be absolutely vital that Fitzpatrick is getting the right pit signals to know just how much he's behind. Just as vital as will be for Colin Bond, and they'll see each other, I think, almost this time, because he might just catch him as he goes over the crest. Visually, I mean.
And see with that smoke coming out through the down through the legs there, that Colin, in fact, will be getting oil surge in the car. This is what's holding him back, is the oil level will be low.
Fitzpatrick's on the straight. So is Bond. And as we see Fitzpatrick spearing off on the right-hand side, Bond is just cresting up over the last rise. You can see him now.
Like Bond is going...
Honda Civic giving him a bad time there. Yes, it's a bad sign, even allowing for the way the other car is braking. That's not good. He's
going into the pits.
Yes. End of the race for Colin Bond, I suspect. In terms of a winning chance, they're waiting here. He's got some problem. We'll time the pit stop and we'll time the gap. In he goes.
Appears to be quite a bit of
the oil
smoke coming from the engine there, lifting the wired up rocket cover cap to insert some more oil. They're putting 1 quart of oil in already. Certainly making this particularly exciting. mechanic also. They've changing the fan belt. Well, that is probably our problem, that the fan belt has become loose. They're putting a brand new one on it. It still was on the pulleys, but they're replacing it. This, of course, has allowed the engine to overheat and, of course, to use more oil than would be normally the case. The engine is boiling. They're just lifting the cover now. It's spurting, as you can see.
How remarkably calm Colin Bond looks.
Well, what else can he do?
Water going in now. Certainly really bad luck for the Marlborough Holden dealer team. Bond having trouble to keep the engine running. The water going onto the engine. It's quite a deal. Unfortunately, did go down the carburetor. The engine has now stalled. He's attempting to start it still.
You can see the open throats.
Once again. They're rewiring the cap for the oil and the rocket cover. Water into the radiator now. Trying to get as much water as possible in, of course. One of the other officials is spraying the electricals. Alan Moffat here trying to give them the go-go signal. The engine has again stalled, unfortunately. He's got it going. It's actually gone out without a bonnet clip.
Oh, and
running into the West Racing car, the Sligo Roads car from Western Australia. Well, certainly incredible luck for the Marlborough Holden dealer team. Back to the main commentary to give us the relative positions now.
Bobby Morris going down the final bend and onto the main straight. Colin Bond spent 1 minute 44 seconds in the pit, and the gap between them is now almost beyond him.
Now we should see Bruce Richardson in the Bobby Morris pits, slowing Fitzpatrick down. Big slowing down signals, because this man's got this race won now if he can bring the car home.
Oh, there'll be some nerves in the Ron Hodgson pit at the moment. A race they've wanted to win for a long time, both the sponsor and Morris himself. A very anxious Bob Morris there. I don't know whether we can talk to him or not, Kerry, but he'd be an interesting person to try and get a word out of at the moment.
We're waiting for you. We've got Bobby Morris here now. Bob, it looks like your birthday present might come true.
Well, the race isn't over yet, and we're not celebrating till the checkered flag comes down, but it's looking good.
You'd have to be the first to say that it was bad luck for Colin if you do in fact come through and win.
Well, this race is good luck and bad luck, and you know, if anybody else would have won the race, I'd like Colin to have won, but we had our bad luck too. We had a flat tyre here that, you know, that could have cost us the race. And bar the flat tyre, we would have been in front of Colin before that last stop. So everybody has bad luck, and I think it's who has the less bad luck.
Well, you've certainly had bad luck in years gone by, so hopefully this is going to be your year. We'll catch up with you a little later. I know you're very, very anxious now, and you want to keep a very close watch on what's happening. Thanks, Bobby, and all the best.
There was a very emotional Bob Morris then. Indeed, he can see the realisation of a great ambition, and yet he knows that it's not there yet. He's still got 15 laps to agonise through. But he's got a great man in the car, John Fitzpatrick, out there, John Davison.
Oh, he's got a fantastic guy out there in the car, because Fitzpatrick's a born professional, and professionals don't get over emotion about it. They just do their job. But I'd say the hardest bloke, the bloke that's got the worst job, has got to be Bobby Morris, because he'd be thinking of what every instrument's got to say and what every tyre pressure would be and what the oil would be doing and how well everything was going to stand up. And I'd say what he's going through must be diabolical.
Colin to win. He doesn't want to lose second place. He's enough of a pro to say, right, I'm going to get a finish rather than destroy the car. Bad luck. So many of the top drivers here have had misfortune. Alan Moffat, who led early on and was driving so well, went out with a fan pulley breaking, allowing the engine to overheat. He had it during the head gasket, and they retired the car. John Goss, who had clutch failure and had to change it, lost so much time because of that. Peter Brock, who ran out of fuel when they had trouble picking up the last few gallons from the tank and then broke an axle. And he was leading at the time when they ran out of fuel. There have been plenty of people in strife. Australia's driving champion Max Stewart in the Max Calvin car. He lost the brakes and did a Bradman down the escape road, a big spin there. The man who may win the Hardy Ferrari 1000. He's got to last another 13 laps. Lucky 13? We'll find out when we return to the Hardy Ferrari 1000. Okay, if we can maybe have a camera across to that to the Bridgestone lap scorer sometime, Phil. The adroit man on the tower. See what the score is.
Jesus.
Yes, we are. Thank you. That's good. That's great. Okay, we're going to try and follow in the class cars before the finish. Long gone out in the circuit there. Fitzpatrick still has the lead. They have 12 laps to go. Well, now the car seems to be running very soundly now, having changed the fan belt.
I'm a little surprised that Colin hasn't been driving a bit harder, actually. Although there may well be problems with his car. He's just not throwing the car the way he was earlier today, and he's not clipping the edges, he's not using the whole of the road. Although Fitzpatrick has been showing quite the way to go with regard to the driving, so it makes me wonder about the car that it's got some other problems apart from the engine one that we were talking about before, because Colin's not the sort of man to give up. He'll fight anybody if it's necessary.
Going pretty quickly through there, but at a slightly more subdued pace. You're right. It could be, of course, that some damage was done, or there's some road limit now as a result of the overheating that resulted from the fan belt breaking.
I don't really think it's either of those two reasons. I really think Colin Bond thinks, well, you know, the only way I'm going to win this race is if the other guy has a shunt or blows it up. What's the point of going off the air and maybe having a shunt or blow up myself? I think he's just prepared to accept the fact that, you know, only the unforeseen to the Morris Fitzpatrick car will cause him to win. So it's better off just to play cool and at least come home second rather than bend the car and have nothing.
14 seconds behind as the lap launch, the information waiting for Colin Bond coming down Conrad Straight. Here he comes now.
Quite interesting.
Bobby Forbes catching, in fact, behind, and it's something he has been doing all through the day.
Back at the last pit stop, in fact, those figures were the other way around, weren't they? There was a minus 113 seconds, if you remember. So that the positions have exactly reversed, and now the pressure is on Fitzpatrick to keep the car together rather than having this total go that we were talking about before. I think this is where we are going to see any drama that comes out of the race now, is this reliability factor. And I think that if we have a look at Fitzpatrick, we'll find out just how hard he's trying with the car, whether he wants to get enough of a gap between himself and any possible problems, or whether he's backed right off.
Here's Fitzpatrick now coming out. He'll go right through. The plan was that Bob Morris would start and Fitzpatrick would take over, and they'd change every time they came in. Bobby Morris saying that he wanted to keep the drivers fresh for this flat-out attack that they were planning. It didn't look as though it was going to work in the early stages because they were back much further than they wanted. 2 minutes 31.58 is the time still being circulated by Fitzpatrick, and that's pretty fast time
yes,
for this stage of the race.
He's not backing off at all from that point of view. it speaks very well for the reliability of the Tiranas that they've been given a very, very hard time today, and yet they've come back, and the reliability factor is such that they have been sufficient, as we said very early on. Of the sprint cars, 1 or 2 of them are bound to get home.
At 151 laps, the order was Morris and Fitzpatrick in this car, car 7. Second, and at 150 laps, the Bond Harvey car, car number 1. He's just about to catch up to John Leffler now, driving very quickly in the Auto Delta car. Just goes by there. See him passing the Alpha. Channel 7, by the way, flew John Fitzpatrick from Europe to take part in this race. They also brought out Marie-Claude Beaumont. Had a bit of good luck and a bit of bad luck. Marie-Claude, unfortunately, who I'm sure John wouldn't mind me saying is somewhat better looking, has retired from the race with mechanical troubles with the Alpha. John Fitzpatrick looks with something a little more than 10 laps to go, as though he and Bobby Morris are going to step into the Hardy Ferrado Tower and collect themselves a lot of trophies, a lot of prize money, but above all, the great sense of success that goes with winning this race.
Very interesting thing seems to be occurring back in positions 3 and 4. We've got the second of the works cars with O'Brien and Negus in it, and the Brock car, in which the lap scores are calling them as being on the same lap, and there's about 3 seconds between those 2 cars, so possibly you can have a look to see what's going on in that area.
So a great battle between 8 and 5. The second Holden dealer team car, Charlie O'Brien from Queensland at the wheel, and Peter Brock, the wheel of car 5, the man who won at Sandown. May have won here today, but for running out of fuel right at that point. Holden is now going. And of course broke an axle a little later, and that put him right out of an outright contention.
Guys for 3rd and 4th should be an absolute ripper.
Right, let me run through the first 10 placings outright. It's all big cars for the first 8 places. It's Morris and Fitzpatrick, the car we're watching now. Magic phone from Europe by Channel 7 to take part in this race. Then it's Bond and Harvey in the Holden dealer team car. Right, yes, he's getting the slacken off sign from the pits. So they've worked out he's got the race, and they don't want to lose it at this late stage. O'Brien and Negus just ahead of the Brock brothers. Peter Brock driving, 8 leading 5. Then a good effort, 1 lap back, but a car that didn't feature early on. This is the Bobby Skelton and Alan Hamilton car, number 3. They're in 5th place. 6th, and a remarkable effort in view of the number of times they've visited the pits, Peter Jansen and Kevin Bartlett. Just ahead of Bob Forbes and Russ McRae. That's car 14 in 7th place. And then the first Falcon, the only surviving Falcon in the race that still has a place on the upper edge. And that is the Carter Winter machine. Just ahead of the first of the 3-litre cars, the Barry Seaton, Don Smith, Ford Capri, and
Murray Carter had just blown up right in front of us here, just puffing smoke out, right in front of the pit straight there.
You can see him.
Poor old Murray Carter.
You've got to get so far.
So, a bad day for Ford. They lost Moffat when he was leading. Now they've lost Carter, who wasn't leading but was running in 8th place. And I don't think he's going to get much further. The flag is out, warning people. So according to the last computer printout, we had Charlie O'Brien in car number 8 just in front of car 5, but we can pick them up, or 5 into the pit, so that's not good from Peter Brock's point of view. But he's got this fuel problem with due to the fact that the pipe is broken in the tank and they can't pick up the full amount of fuel, so it's just fuel he's getting. But that should make his job of catching Charlie O'Brien even harder.
Peter Brock and Philip Brock were in fact running 3rd. They've now slipped into 4th place after that pit stop. That will probably put them roughly, I'd say you'd be looking around about half a minute behind.
There don't appear to be any problems with the Brock car, save for the fact that the driver is very thirsty and the car is very thirsty. Similarly, as we told you earlier, the pickup pipe is thought to have broken and not allowing them to use the last 6 or 7 gallons of fuel. So therefore, they've had at least one, I think this is the 2nd extra pit stop, to just make sure that they're going to be able to have enough fuel above that broken pickup pipe. It certainly has not been Peter Brock's day. Bad luck for Peter. The engine firing up, the hand of drink out of the car, and Peter Brock is away.
And that's the distance that he has to make up on Charlie O'Brien, climbing the mountain, just going up the top and heading towards Skyline. as Peter Brock goes out very rapidly under acceleration back onto the track again. And now third place has eluded him by almost half the distance of Mount Panorama's 6.172 kilometre circuit.
There goes Bruce Hodson in the escort. We saw him earlier on the side of the road there, just repairing his own car as it was in a rally rather than a race.
There's Charlie O'Brien hustling the car down through the S-bends. Two leading 3-litre cars, which are running in 9th and 10th place. Barry Seaton in the Ford Capri, and the man who won the category last year is Don Holland in the Mazda RX-3. They're both on the same lap, so quite a scrap there in the 3-litre category as well. Down the main straight goes the Charlie O'Brien car. Fairly secure in third place at the moment. He's got Peter Brock behind. Nine laps to go. Oh, just 9 laps too many.
Eco car with a front right hand, and Murray Carter looks like a mystery engine.
It's a real cripple's lane at the moment with Murray Carter at least in front of the Schleco car. You can see the problem with their front right hand wheel. We get a much better view when he swings the car around. Not nearly enough air there. Into the pit zone. Bad luck, but they've been truly consistent and really trying very hard. They've gone well today. Off the leaderboard, unfortunately, with the number of problems they've had. They've always got back in the race and given everything they had. Now they need just another tyre to get back again.
Carter's in the pits, bonnet up, needless to say. It'll be interesting to see whether he can complete that, get back into be a race finisher.
8 laps to go for Fitzpatrick when he crosses the line. There's the sign. His time's still good. Almost looked relaxed the way he grabbed the wheel there, just pulled it round, not going quite as wide as before. Gets a signal from the Mazda driver in front. Please go to the left. There's Peter Brock behind. Peter a long way behind in terms of laps. In 4th place, about half a lap behind the man in 3rd place, Charlie O'Brien, in the 2nd of the Holden Wheeler team cars. Now running 2nd and 3rd. Colin Bond in 2nd spot, having to make that emergency stop to get fan belt changed. John Fitzpatrick not nearly as exuberant through these bends as he was before. He's had the slow down sign. Watching through the cutting. I don't think he'll be hanging the tail this time.
Bobby Skelton, Alan Hamilton car has also come into the pits fleet. It looks as though it's only a routine stop at the present stage.
They're running in 5th place.
Back out again.
Fitzpatrick not quite using all the road, but still going pretty quickly, still taking round and just over the 30s, about 32, 33. Quite enough to win this race if he can just keep it going. That's got to be the name of the game for the remaining laps. That's 7.5 to go. Fitzpatrick, 33, was almost a golf professional. Still plays golf, so Frank Gardner and he have occasional games. They're both about at the same standard. Frank's a pretty good golfer too. John Fitzpatrick had the choice of being a professional golfer or a racing driver and decided to be a racing driver. Well, I'm gone. No sign of oil now. The change of the belt seems to have solved the problem. 115 seconds is the gap, you can see. At 154 laps covered with 9 to go, which is about a lap ago. Well, let's go down to Kerry Luckins with the man who might win the race, or the owner of the team that might win the race.
Yes, with me now, and very nervous, but very, very happy at this stage, Ron Hodgson.
Gary, I am nervous. You know, we've got 5 laps to go, and as you know, in this sport, anything can happen.
Bob, Ron, you're an ex-lap record holder here back about 12 or 13 years ago in a Jaguar. How would you like to be out there now and in John Fitzpatrick's shoes?
I'd enjoy it. I'd try it. I don't think I could do it in these days, but you're a bit out. It was 17 years ago, 1960, I had lap record here, and that was a heck of a long while ago. I've been coming here nearly every year for 17 years. This is our 5th attempt at Bathurst. As you probably know, we ran second last year. If we win this one, I can tell you we'll be back next year and the year after and all the rest of them.
There'll be a big party in the old town tonight if you win.
It's going to be a big noise, I can tell you.
Well, I'll let you get back. I know you want to get back to the pit to just keep an eye on things. All the best for the last few laps, and we'll catch up with you later. Thanks, Ron.
And the man who may win the race, John Fitzpatrick, following the man who's not going to win it, Peter Brock. The great race continues. We'll be back in a moment. We're trying to find out just where the 3-litre cars are, because they're supposed to be on the same lap, and there could be a real dice there just for us to look at for a moment.
No, there's a bit of a gap.
23, is there?
Yes.
Well, maybe we should just refer to it in some way.
Yes.
Yep, we're timing the gap, Phil, but maybe we might, if we follow Barry Seaton, but we might just try and pick up 23 for a little while and stay up.
Fitzpatrick.
6 at the end of this lap.
Yeah. 6.5, yep. Right.
6.5 for the worst laps of his life.
You're right. Skelton Hamilton's in again.
Alan Hamilton, the Max Wright team, the Bob Skelton car. Bad luck, he came in the previous lap, thought he had a flat tyre and was sent out again after that, inspected the tyre very closely, but now they thinking it is a broken axle. These broken axles here at Mount Panorama today have been fairly frequent. Very bad luck for the crew, going particularly well. Hamilton's first drive in a long distance race, I think, since he drove for Ford back in about 1969. Just now trying to remove the offending wheel.
Kerry, we're
now they've decided it wasn't a broken axle, it was a loose wheel. But Hamilton has now turned the engine off, so perhaps they're not even
in the 3-litre class. Jim McEwen with Jeff Leeds in the Mazda RX-3, a class still being led by Barry Seaton on the same lap as Don Holland. But enough margin to suggest that Seaton is going to pull out a class win. The win that was denied him last year when so close to the end he lost the back wheel, lost 4th place outright. The 3-litre cars aren't doing as well this year because the bigger cars have kept going a bit better than they did last year. And while Seaton has been faster, he's back in about 8th place outright, but just ahead of John Holland.
About 1 minute and 5 seconds, Evan.
1 minute and 5 seconds to get there. There's a signal to let Jansen know that they've got a safe 5th place for car 15. Here it comes now. Peter Jansen, the merry madcap, the deerstalker hat out of the way at the moment, to be replaced by a crash hat. In 5th, an amazing result considering the minor problems, but the frequent problems they've had. Bill Evans in the little Datsun 1200, still in Class A, or the 1300cc class, to be more accurate. The outside line as they come up, mountain straight, just on a kilometre long. Jansen, 5th outright. A nice touch, by the way, for the finishing ceremony. Normally is carried out by the man who makes the race possible. General manager of Hardy Ferrodo, Mr. George Hibbert, has said, I'd like Sterling Moss and Jack Bratton to make the presentation of the prize to the outright winner. A very gracious gesture, and one that I'm sure people who want to see Jack and Sterling again will very much appreciate. We'll have the chance to talk to them when the time comes to the prize presentation, just after the checkered flag falls for whoever it's going to be, probably car 7, the leader. Let's watch Fitzpatrick and his cornering technique.
Your third visit to Australia, your first was way back in 1964 at Sandown.
That's right, I came over with BMC to drive the Mini Coopers with Paddy and Timo. That was a fantastic trip, really wonderful. We went to Adelaide, Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney. It was a wonderful trip.
What have you done since then? You were very much at the start of your racing career. How long have you been driving?
In fact, this year is my 15th year. I'd only been driving for 4 years when I came to Australia first. And I've always concentrated on saloon and sports cars. I never have been involved with single-seaters at all.
How did you get involved in motor racing in the first place?
Well, like most people, I had my own car and did a few local events for 12 months and then was lucky enough to do well, and then somebody said, well, come and drive my car, and someone else said, come and drive mine. And my big break, of course, was when BMC were looking for someone to drive their Mini Coopers with Paddy, and I happened to win a race when John Cooper was there watching. So that, of course, was really the start for me.
What have you done since then?
What have I done since? Some people say not very much. No, I drove BMC for 2 or 3 years, then I moved over to Ford with Anglias, Escorts, Ford Cortinas, and then I got over to Germany. I drove for Ford Germany for a year, and then that got me into Porsches for 3 years, BMW, all factory cars, and I've been driving BMW this year.
Let's watch the tail of the car. With 4 laps to go, there is smoke appearing, and it's getting worse by the meter, virtually, Howard.
Rear axle. It has to be the rear axle of this car rather than the engine, and it's been coming now since pit corner and up the back straight, so it's getting worse round the whole of this lap. He's going to be very lucky to make this race, you know.
We have 4 laps to go, and the leader, John Fitzpatrick, may not yet know the trouble, unless he can spot that oil. Watch it there, that low angle. Now, he has a margin of how much?
Oh, around about a minute 20, I think it may be a little bit more, but
yes,
you know.
Yes, it was over the 100-second mark that the Holden Deal team boys were hanging out.
Right, as a competitor, I can't even stand to look at it.
Oh.
He can't stop. It's as simple as that. He has to go until this thing breaks.
He must go. In the pits, I can imagine the anguish going through the minds of Bobby Morris and Ron Hodson.
They don't know yet.
Well, when they go by, we'll try and peep at them and look at their faces through the backpack camera and just see what does go through their mind. But if they see the oil, it may not be showing under acceleration there. We'll wait and see, though. John Fitzpatrick, the great British driver, European GT champion. They've got Spanish ready. They may be trying to pull him in to tighten it up if that's the problem. Let's see if that's a signal to him.
No.
No, yeah, no.
They do.
They've got their fingers crossed.
This is the place where it started. He's now approximately 3/4 of a lap ahead of Colin Bond. He can drive slowly, and he should make it.
I'd love to see the pit signal that Colin Bond gets. We may look at that in the return to this great race, the Hardy Ferrado 1000.
I think he's going to make it.
Catching. It was 3/4 of a lap as his name was down. I'll pick it up this time. We're now down to what, 3?
It will be after the 3 1/4 laps or 3 1/3 laps now. In a bit. Yes, he slowed right down. Well, we're in for a great finish. I hope he can keep going. Yes, yes. Oh, yes.
Bit of drama on.
They're doing it themselves.
It's Quo Vadis.
3 laps to go, and the smoke screen being laid by John Fitzpatrick, and car 7 grows worse by the minute.
The car's about to stop. I don't think it's going to get round another lap.
Could be gearbox.
Could be gearbox. I still think it's the rear axle. Car's going slower and slower.
Less than 3 laps to go. You can see now the 3-litre and 2-litre cars pulling out to pass. He has a long lead, more than half a lap over Colin Bond, who's coming second. You're getting some fairly frantic pit signals. But it's a question of whether the car can keep going. Fitzpatrick, the real professional, has backed off. He's trying to nurse the car round, but he's got to do it another 2 3/4 times. You can see the smoke pouring from the back. Axles and transmissions have been a real problem this year. The great power, the very sticky tires. It's terribly hard on track pressure. Bond is going down the S's. That's the difference. You can see smoke pouring from beneath the car.
Bond is good.
And these are the men who are really suffering. It's just another race as far as John Fitzpatrick is concerned. Much as he'd like to win it, but for Bobby Morris, it's a lifelong ambition.
It's everything to him.
He's out there waiting. Oh.
Bobby Morris has to make
Terry
it.
Duckins. The general consensus of opinion is that it's a differential or a broken axle. They've decided not to pull him in, to leave it to the discretion of John Fitzpatrick. As you've just mentioned, a professional international driver, they're going to leave it to him to decide what to do. But it certainly didn't look good very close the last time he came past. And a very, very disappointed Bob Morris. He doesn't want to have anything to say at this stage, which is most understandable. But it's certainly rotten luck. Bruce Richardson, too, the chief mechanic for the Ron Hodgson team, just walking back to the pit very, very dejectedly, having worked for many, many years, Bruce too, to pull off a win here at Mount Panorama Circuit. Ron Hodgson, as we spoke to only 10 minutes or so ago, he was really looking to this win. It's certainly cruel luck if John Fitzpatrick isn't able to nurse the car to the finish.
Well, I don't think Colin Bond's going to catch him, Kerry. It's a question of whether John Fitzpatrick can last. He's down the straight again. The smoke hasn't got any worse.
That's because there's not too much oil left.
Yes.
The heat temperature is such that it may well crack the whole thing wide open. Bobby Morris has to make a decision. Does he pull him in and go for a safe second place, or does he let him go, or go for broke, literally?
I think Bobby Morris doesn't want any more second places. I think they want to win. Second would be a bitter disappointment. No point bringing him in. They can't do anything to keep him out there. They've not that sort of margin.
He must have a good pit signal this time. He must know where he stands, so he knows how slowly he can drive this car.
He has 2 more laps, just 2 more laps. He has 136 seconds in hand. The information is there. The decision, though, is John Fitzpatrick's. Well, it's in good hands. He's a pro. He's probably gone through this. He's known as many disappointments as most people. But Ron Hodgson, goodness me, look at the face.
There's nothing you can say. There's nothing that he can do. God, I'll tell you what, there must be a lot of Hail Marys being said in that pit.
I think he's tending to speak the other way, but he's...
Oh, it's only a facade. He must be absolutely beside himself with anxiety. I think it's about the only word.
Oh, he's a great sportsman. He's used to motorsport. He's had his disappointments, but this is one race that he wants to win, and I think it's one race that Bobby Morris even more wants to win. John Fitzpatrick out there nursing the car around. Bond is closing up, going down the S's. Bond himself, who seemed to have victory taken away at the last minute. When the fan belt went and the car started to overheat, he had smoke appearing, and we felt great sympathy for him, and now he may just catch the crippled John Fitzpatrick, who has something like 1.5 laps to go. After 161 laps of Mount Panorama, it's not a 1,000-kilometre race. It goes to almost 1,004 kilometres because of the size of the track, and that last 4 kilometres might just be too much. The 2 and 3 litre cars and even a little Mini about to whip by Fitzpatrick. Up down the mountain for the second last time. He only has to go around once more after this. He's got one more descent and one more cruel, killing mountain climb. 200 metres to the top of the mountain. And that's what will take it out of the transmission. Eases up. There's a signal for Colin Bond, who's gone down the bottom. Not quite sure what's happening. He can't see it. The pit signals are only indicating he's closing, but he doesn't know why. He can't catch up. He's got to keep going, but he's got to keep going pretty quickly in case the crippled car 7 slows down and can be caught on the line. We're set for a real grandstand finish here. Fitzpatrick pouring smoke from the back of the car now, as is Murray Carter.
That's Bruce Richardson. That's Bruce Richardson, chief mechanic, who has worked himself into the ground here. That man has had no sleep for 3 months trying to get this thing all together, and he can see it going down the drain.
There's a picture that needs no words. Still the smoke screen continues. They have 1 1/4 laps to go. He might still do it, but Bruce Richardson knows his cars, and he believes that their chance has gone. But Fitzpatrick is still going, nursing the car, doing all he can, aware of the problem. I don't think it could be in better hands, John Davison.
No, couldn't be in better hands, but oh, God. You know, this finish is like the 26-mile marathon at the Olympic Games. And 2 athletes run into the stadium together, and you just
1 lap to go. He is on
Yes.
Just 6 kilometres to go, the last lap.
Last lap.
Now, Ken, for the last time, he climbed them out. I don't know how Bruce Richardson is feeling now. The car's still running. He'd almost wish it had stopped, but it's still going, just stretching out his anguish. John Fitzpatrick, Colin Bond in pursuit. Can't quite catch him as long as he can keep it going. Up the mountain for the last time.
Looks healthy enough. I think it will keep going.
Something like that will stop in 5 minutes.
Fitzpatrick, 33, former European GT champion.
Murray Carter stopped halfway down Conrod.
Well, Bobby Morris doing all he can, both hands.
No, they don't want to look.
Almost weeping. Bobby himself is so emotional. Fitzpatrick up through the cutting, the hardest part of the course, the steepest part. He's through that.
Staggering.
He's through that. Can he get down? Almost to the end of the climb. The marshal's waving him on. Look at the flag marshal there. They'd get out and push if they could. That's the man from Castrol in there, almost weeping with emotion as well. So many people with so many hopes. There's Bobby Morris waiting there. If Bob could take off his shoes, he would, but he wants to walk around. He couldn't stand still.
That's Bruce Richardson's wife. He's hugging there.
Here he comes. For the last time. The crowd, look at the crowd. The cheers, the encouragement they're trying to give him to keep going. The message passed down to Bobby. He's still going, Bob. Oh, the smoke. Oh. With a great smoke screen pouring behind him, John Fitzpatrick, 33. One of the great touring car endurance drivers of the world. Colin Bond on the mountain after him. He's not going to be that far behind going through the cutting. It depends just as the situation is reversed. As Bobby Morris's car, being driven by John Fitzpatrick, goes down through the bend for the last time. There's Bruce Richardson. He can't bear the pain of waiting. He's down the mountain. He's on the straight now. He's got a chance. He's got these humps to get over, and their final cruel little rise from the last bend. But John Fitzpatrick now going down in these last moments of the 1976 Hardy-Frodo 1000. Smoke pouring from the back of his crippled car, going as slowly as he has ever driven down this Mount Panorama circuit. Colin Bond in pursuit, but he can't catch him unless Fitzpatrick stops. They're still going. He has less than a kilometre to go. Colin Bond only about a kilometre behind him and really going hard, trying to make it up. All he needs is for Fitzpatrick to stall on the last bend, and Bond will snatch victory. Smoke is pouring from the back of the car, but he's going to do it, I think. He's coming down to the bend for the last time. And it's John Fitzpatrick through the bend, the car still driving. And he waves, he's got the checkered flag, and it's John Fitzpatrick who wins for the Ron Hodgson team. And in the pits, can you imagine the elation that's going on in there? Well, if ever a man nursed the car to the finish, and now there'll be some nursing. Bruce Richardson suddenly erupts into laughter. Ron Hodgson, I can't see him. Bobby Morris, he's just too upset to know whether to laugh or to cry or what to do. And John Fitzpatrick who nursed the car back, now is going to swing the car around, or he's going to try and do another lap, which he's not supposed to do. A beaming Ron Hodson there. Howard Marsden, maybe you can bring a tone of sanity and quietness into this by running through some of the results and some of the performances.
Right, let's try and do a recap on that. I can't fill in on that. I'm just looking for the Holden dealer team car, which has just finished now, and that's staggering as well. That's only just made it over the line as well, and he finished 50 seconds behind, only 50 seconds behind, when the car that's just as tired as is Bobby Morris's. Well, John, this is your first Bathurst. Could you believe that?
Oh, I've never seen anything like it. I've watched all the films on the Olympic Games, and that's an incredibly emotional event. But, you know, as a person involved in motorsport, God, I can see what they went through. It really has affected me.
And he's pushing it up the hill again. The darn thing will do it again. Almost quicker than he did it the last time. Well, I don't think we could ask for anything more with regard to excitement and entertainment we've had during this afternoon. I think the pundits sort of were more or less right on the predictions this year when we talk about the main class. It was the Falcon Tirana battle that we know so well. I think the major difference, looking back with a little bit of hindsight now, is the fact that the Tiranas have had a year of development, absolutely constantly one against the other. The Falcons have been there, but not as much. The cars are beyond the ability of that car. The Falcon is carrying 1,000 pounds too much weight, which has to be stopped and accelerated, and the cars are having to be pushed too far with regard to tuning to make them competitive anymore. John Goss has done a very good job to get his car back into the race, but he's 3 hours down.
Well, this would be, of all the Hardy Ferritos, this would be one of the greatest sporting events in Australia, and God, what a befitting end to it. And, you know, I think Fitzpatrick will go back to England next week, and, you know, I think he'll look back on it probably as one of his most nerve-wracking experiences, not because he brought it home, but because he realised what it meant to everyone in the pit.
This man's come here and he's ended up with Bathurst fever. Well, going through the people that we should talk about, I think we have to mention again the Moss and Brabham cars. They were not looked upon as being front runners, possibly people to run in the 5th and 6th and 7th place, but we're all looking forward to seeing how these two chaps would handle this particular event. And the gear selection problem that came to Jack Brabham on the start line, one of the smaller Triumphs hit him in the back, and that put him out straight away. So we lost one of the people that we really wanted to see, rather than see in a winning position. From there on, the speed of the event was such that I think the end result we can see here. The message is there, as we again all thought it would be. A sprinter will get through, but only just.
Well, there must be one guy looking at his television set at the moment back in Melbourne, and that'd have to be Brian Sampson. And if you're looking, Brian, you know, to win Bathurst must be one of the greatest thrills, whether you drove for 2 hours or 4 hours or whatever it was. To win Bathurst must be a fantastic thing, and I can imagine how Brian Sampson must have felt when he was sitting back in his chair in Melbourne. He must have really felt for that team.
Well, you're still watching the great race at the Hardy Ferrota 1000.
Sterling, you all right here? No, that's very fair. What about lights? Get up there, Al.
I'll need those too, but to let the public
Only this one for the presentation. But do you leave that on?
I'm talking that.
Can I speak?
Yes.
We don't want you to let the public know that I'm calling on to make the presentation, if you don't mind. Okay.
Yes, I can. Okay. Yes, I can, thanks, Phil.
Yeah, it's going to be better. Don't you have the same?
Going to talk to the drivers them and then put them into dispute. That was still the order. Do you mind? Because of the time factor, what I thought you'd do, you'll welcome the board very quickly, so give me a chance to offer 60 breaks for and then I'm going to back down and let these fellows do the presentation, and then you can come down a little bit later. Then you can be the first, yeah?
Right. Yes. I can't recall such scenes of great emotion here at the Hardy-Ferodo Tower as we wait for the two winning drivers to join us here on the rostrum. We're waiting for Bob Morris and John Fitzpatrick and their entrant, Ron Hodgson. Here they come. We'll bring the drivers on. Ladies and gentlemen, Bob Morris, John Fitzpatrick.
Up that side of Evan.
Could you move along a bit, please, John? Move along a bit, please, Bob. No, thanks. No, it's a kind thought. We'll be talking. Indeed, John Fitzpatrick's been working. We'll be talking to him about it in just a moment. Firstly, though, the man who made this race responsible, the man who I think feels as emotional as we all do, the general manager of Hardy-Ferodo, Mr. George Hibbert.
Thank you, Evan. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a most thrilling race, and Bob, we're all in rather a state of shock here in the centre. You pushed it just too close for us. To try and offer some compensation.
Ron Hodgson.
Ron Hodgson.
The entrant of the
try and
town.
offer some compensation for the disappointment the Australian viewing audience must have experienced today in not seeing these all-time greats, Sterling Moss and Jack Brabham.
Yes.
I thought it might be appropriate, in the unique occasion of having him here in Bathurst, to call on Sterling Moss and Jack Brabham to present the prize this year to such a fine team. It's Ron Hodgson and the boys.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you.
All I can say is fantastic. Really fantastic. Tell me, was it twice as good as being second?
It was 10 times as good.
Fantastic. Really terrific. Absolutely sensational. Really was. Where's Jack? Thank you. Come on, Jack. Yeah, wait a minute. Joe, these drivers. How much is it for you?
Let me speak first of all to the man who nursed that car home to the finish. John Fitzpatrick, what was going through your mind in those last anxious laps?
Well, I just wasn't sure what had happened to Colin. I didn't know Colin was in trouble. And the axle shaft had broke, and it was possible to drive the car, but I was losing so much time, I just couldn't believe that. I thought Colin would overtake me any minute, and I didn't really know what had happened to him. But you never thought a Pommy would take it home, did you?
I did.
I don't know how Bobby Morris feels. If he could speak, let's call upon the man who has maintained a tradition by winning the race while he was still 27. Now, tomorrow he's 28, and I suspect there'll be a fairly big birthday party. Bobby Morris.
Thank you. All I can say is I'd like to thank everybody in motor racing, everybody that's ever helped me with my motor racing, especially Ron Hodgson, Ron Misson, Bruce Richardson, who prepared the cars, all the boys who worked all night for the last 3 or 4 nights and weeks. And I'd just like to say this is the best part of motor racing is winning, and we won.
In a moment, we'll be talking to the drivers who came second. But firstly, let's speak to the man who made it possible and I think enjoyed the victory as much as anyone, Ron Hodgson. Oh, sorry, I'll get Ron first.
Thank you.
Ron,
yes, Jack. Oh, thanks very much, Jack. And I'd love to accept this plaque. It's great to accept something from a Ford dealer, in particular when you're a Holden dealer. And another great thing I thought today, Jack, that you chose a Holden to drive. Thank you very much, Jack.
Thank you, Ron. Actually, I must say that this is obviously one of the toughest races, certainly in Australia. and there's a fantastic amount of disappointed sponsors, but to be the sponsor on top must be really fantastic, and congratulations, even if you are a Holden dealer. Thank you.
I'd just like to say one thing, that I've gone 25,000 miles, and it was a great race, fabulous race. I'm sorry I didn't enjoy my bit, but yours was really worth watching. And I'd like to present you with these Hardy Trophy. Here we are, 1,000, the Hardy Trophy 1,000. Congratulations, fabulous show, and good luck next time. We'll be back to have a go at you maybe next year. Thanks.
That is great news. I don't know how many of you were keeping an accurate time, but Sterling Moss, when he was driving that crippled car in a show for the people throughout Australia, was lapping in around 2 minutes 32, which is not bad time, and the sign of a champion on form. Now, two drivers who very nearly won the race are Colin Bond and Johnny Harvey. Colin?
Well, thank you, Evan. All I can say is that we come here every year and we think we're going to win it, but we never seem to do, not since 1969 anyway. But I really feel that if there was anyone else to win the race, I really think that the two that won it today thoroughly deserved it.